I'm just having a few problems. How's the audio coming through? Is it coming okay? I couldn't get my video up. I couldn't, somehow all my settings got reset on Restream. I don't know why, they just got reset. Is the audio coming through okay? Hello, guys, anyone? Just comment, say yes, no. Exactly, precisely. Zombie mukbang. Harry always arrives exactly when he intends to, and that is exactly it. Perfectly said. Sound is good. Yes, good to hear. Well, that's the main one. As long as you can hear me, the rest is unimportant in that regard. So, yeah, everything seems to be on the hunky-dory. So I was just a bit concerned it was just playing up. I couldn't actually get the video to load up for whatever reason. It was just trying, and it just wouldn't work. So, well, that's strange. Wouldn't believe this. StreamYard's always slow behind, and when it comes to basically, God, nice one, Blinky. I better share that. Yes, yes. Always nice. See, I can even do those tricks. Oh well, somebody has to try. So there you go. Back here. I wish I was drinking. I'd have an excuse. Oh yeah, fair enough. Still looks good. It's not too bad. But as you said, it could have been done better. Anyway, back to the frivolities, back to the regular stuff. Sound like you to sort of rush things, Blinky. You know, I thought you were a man of precision. You know, highly refined fingers and tactile sensation when it comes to touching and caressing the mouse. Well, the mouse isn't here at the moment, so you don't have to worry. We can get away with anything. Yes. How's it hanging with everyone? Anybody any questions? Any things that they would like to get off their chest? Morning fartless gang. Nice one. Yes. Nobody's smelly here. Maybe Blinky a bit, you know. Did you put your aftershave on, Blinky? Did you lather yourself between the legs as well? I understand. There's always one in the group. It actually hasn't come on the YouTube. It just came on the YouTube there. Well, sugar, your red blood cells only run on sugar. So I'll tell you one thing, if you don't have any sugar, but the body doesn't, look, the purpose is, it doesn't have any structural role. So sugar doesn't play any structural role. It's not a fuel that was basically, it may be a modern day fuel for the body, but it wasn't in the past. And we know that from the N15 data. So it's quite clear that the N15 data tells us that we got our fuel from fat and all that. But our lineage, our common ancestor, which would have been with the chimps, according to evolutionary science and 99 odd percent similar genetics, which is highly unlikely that was due to chance. That common ancestor pretty much had a glycolytic type system. It didn't basically use efficiently fats, and it didn't basically use efficiently ketones in that regard. Even though animals like chimps and all that can utilize those things, and short chain fatty acids as well and stuff like that, the thing is that wasn't their primary fuel. Our common ancestors' primary fuel was basically glucose. But from what we can determine now, obviously it may have not been, we don't know. It may have been mixed fuel because we don't have that ancestor anymore to be able to check. Because even though animals diverged and split, they, like we changed, the chimps could have changed as well, become more glycolytic, and we became more, utilizing fats and ketones and stuff like that. So obviously it's based on speculation, so to speak. So that's all we can go on. But I would say that beyond the red blood cells, a small amount that's required for some of the biological functions in the brain, pretty much most of the rest of the body doesn't need sugar. It can actually work quite well on ketones and free fatty acids. So it's a reserve fuel. Our body doesn't require to eat. The minimum requirement is 0, even according to the USDA. If you look at the USDA data, the minimum requirement for sugar is physiologically 0, since we can produce it endogenously, internally, within our bodies through gluconeogenesis, demand-driven. So it's not really, for the red blood cells, a bit for the brain, and that's about it, primarily. It's a few other areas, but primarily it just has to do with areas that the way these organs derive energy is slightly different, for the simple fact that that exists. And there's other animals. We're not the only mammal that actually operates like that. There are many other mammals, both carnivores, other carnivore animals, and basically herbivore animals that also can endogenously produce sugar, and similar pathways exist in that regard. So it's not specific to humans. So to say that we have to, we can point out to a whole lot of other carnivores in nature that exactly have a minimum requirement for those different areas. And the same thing, if you look at dolphins, they're a carnivore. Whales, they're a carnivore. They still require glucose for certain functions as well. So they endogenously produce it. So that doesn't, for somebody to basically use the argument, because, we require, that must be our main fuel. No, the body can create it. It's not our main fuel. It may have become now because everybody's eating kibble since the last couple of thousand years. But before that wasn't the case. So, that's not an argument. Just because we've got that sort of flexibility or certain pathways operate in a certain way. Maybe the reason why the red blood cells, my hypothesis is, you have to have basically a system that's basically all organs require, the entire body requires, blood. Okay, so if you're basically if you're transporting a lot of through hemoglobin, through your red blood cells, you're transporting a lot of oxygen, which can be very reactive. If you've got mitochondria in there, potentially you could actually cause a lot of damage to the functioning of red blood cells. So I suspect this is why they've actually opted for this glycolytic pathway, which basically doesn't require mitochondria, so it doesn't actually, the integrity and the interaction between the oxygen molecules that are being transported are not going to be interacting, because basically glycolysis doesn't really require sort of oxygen to basically happen. And so I suspect it's that reason why red blood cells have evolved in that way. It makes no other logical sense. It's probably a protective mechanism in that regard. And so, that's how it is. But that doesn't mean that there's a requirement for sugar from the diet, because a whole lot of other carnivores do the same thing as we do, with their red blood cells. So what's the difference? That's not an argument. I know that people try to use that argument, but that's a stupid argument in my book. Anyway, let's move on. We know fat is used for many things besides as fuel. I think I've covered that. Used for structural material as well, for hormones and many other things. Here's a thing about mice, Richard, you should know. He has concerning issues. G'day, Dave. Good to see you, mate. How's the weather in Barcelona? G'day, Fluffy. How's it going? And morning from DJ Projectus. And a few more fans here for Dave. In ice cream, you mean? Don got it right. Yeah, or ice cream lovers. Yes. Hold on, let me just... Wish I could actually... Just give me a sec. No, that's not going to work. Shit. Just bear with me for a sec. Just wanted to change something. Can I change that? No, it's not allowing me. Oh, bugger. Anyway. Move that over there because it's really hard to basically read things off the screen. Now I can actually read things. Okay, hi Harry. If I eat almonds, nice oxalate foods with cheese, am I mitigating the damage regarding kidney stones? Not really. What food is best? I mean, remember, almonds have got oxalate. They do tend to be higher in PUFA from plants, which can be problematic. Plus, you've got a lot of lectins and stuff like that. More issues for your gut in that regard. Cheese, most of it's pasteurized unless it's raw, and it's got lactoferrin to bind the lectins. can be an issue. Yeah. And most of the foods are, you've got your spinach and stuff like that. Most, some the potatoes and tubers and stuff like that tend to be much higher in oxalate. I mean, in the past we used to combine it with, we had small amounts, combined it with lactoferrin from the raw dairy products, which played a role. I mean, I've mentioned that before, but again, is it what you want to be doing? I mean, having a bit of a treat now and then may be okay, on a one day like I have on a Saturday where I have a few indiscretions, but do you want to be doing that on a daily basis? Probably not a good idea, personally. Oh, sir, from Richard. Mouse. Cute. That's all I can say. Harry, what kind of fat is the fat that is made from? I'm not really. What kind of fat is the fat that is made from sugar? It usually is palmitate, which is a 16 carbon, which is a saturated fat, palmitate, which is produced within the liver. You're talking about fat deposited in the liver and around the organs. The fat is different from the fat deposited around the body. Just because visceral fat isn't a bad thing, your organs still require some visceral fat. Your organs still require, some energy. If you were to eliminate all visceral fat around the organs, you would basically have massive organ failure. So that's not a good thing. It's the high deposition of organ fat which is a problem. So too much visceral fat is a problem. Too little is also a problem. So you need some. But in terms of, when you have excess sugar and you're engaging the Randall cycle, that sugar will be primarily converted to a very safe and stable form of saturated fat, which is carbon-16 palmitate. So that's the form that will actually be stored. So it is very safe. It can actually be cleaved off as 4 ketones. It's good for structural material. Remember, your lung surfactant is just made of choline and palmitate, and many other critical structural components are made from palmitate and choline or other protein combinations and stuff like that. So it's not a bad form. The body knows what it's doing. It's been doing it for thousands of years in the way it stores from sugar fats. The problem is excess fats around the organs, excess fats subcutaneously. That's when it becomes a problem. Seasonal sugar, which used to fatten us up, isn't a problem, especially in the periods where we had warming of the planet and we had leaner animals. We needed that sugar to basically fatten up. It's the reason why the early domesticated animals were made and bred in a way that they would be fattier, because we knew the value of fat. But the fat, how it gets deposited, depends on the sort of combination, the way it's actually coming in and stuff like that. There's a tendency when it actually comes in as fructose to basically be stored in the viscera. When it comes in as glucose excess, it tends to be stored in the subcutaneous. So, and this is another reason why, even if you have consumed no fructose whatsoever, a small amount of glucose will be converted to fructose. So it can actually generate this type of fat to store as fatty droplets in organs, and also export them into the viscera, because there is some requirement. It's about a few percentage points. I think around about 3% or whatever. It's only when you have excess fructose that you actually end up overproducing up to you can convert up to 30% of your glucose into fructose, and then that going through the enzymatic pathways from fructose will be converted to fats. So where excess glucose, on the other hand, if you've actually repleted glycogen and you've got excess and you're actually engaging the Randall cycle, then the body will basically take both the fats that you're actually bringing in from remnant chylomicrons and the excess sugar, will convert it to triglycerides, put it into VLDL and export it out and circulate around, see how much the body can use, and then the rest of it will go into the adipose tissue. So a lot of it will go into subcutaneous. So that's why people that used to consume tubers, and stuff like that traditionally in countries like even today, Russian people that actually may engage the Randall cycle. You see these big old ladies that are quite overweight but very healthy. It's just basically subcutaneous fat. It's not coming from fructose; it's coming from glucose, excess glucose, and that's the source. So that's where why the different depositions happen in different parts. But you still need some visceral, but you don't need a lot. So that's there. The body knows if you give it no fructose, it will just generate as much as required to support the organs and no more. The excess comes when you start guzzling down a lot of things like fruit juices and stuff like that, things that outside season we would normally not have. Anyway, yes, I'll be doing one of those recipes soon. Oh, you're in Bulgaria. Oh, good for you. Hope you're having fun. They do have really nice goat cheeses in Bulgaria, and I hope you're in the mountainous areas where they have those really nice goat cheeses, and I hope you've got access to a bit of goat milk as well. Enjoy. I can say whatever I like. Blinky. Whether it's on, I can repeat myself, I can do a double backflip, I can basically inebriate myself, I can do whatever, I can plank myself. You got a problem, Blinky? Yep, I do. That's what it was. It couldn't be anything else. It's not the way he describes it. It's basically the foods that he talks about have MK4 in them. So that's why we know that it was K2, So because there was no other fat-soluble vitamin in there, and we know from all the research that that's what played a role. And eventually that was actually... There was research back then. I can't remember when they were actually able to determine that that's what it was, but I just can't remember it. There was something. Sally Fallon once on one of the videos on Western Aid Price Foundation, she talked about it, but I just cannot remember the video. It's a long time ago. We're talking about 9 years ago, 9 or 10 years ago. This is in the early stages when. Back after I had my operation, about a year later, when I hit the web trying to find information and all that, I came across Sally Fallon's The Oiling of America, about seed oils and stuff like that. And she covered a lot of these sort of about the Activate X and being MK4 and a lot of those sort of things and the fat-soluble vitamins. And that was that part. And then also I came across Lustig research on back then as well, which was on sugar, which was on fructose and all these sort of things. And it was basically those things that basically then sort of transitioned me into sort of the low carb paleo type communities. And I started making some changes. Initially it was still high fat Mediterranean like my father, and then slowly shifted from there, making some changes and playing around to see what worked, what didn't work, what I felt better with, and stuff like that. So it was a bit of an exploration through that stage. But yes, that, from memory, it was about a decade ago. That was basically what it was, but I cannot for the life of me trying to remember. Yeah, if you find a Sally Fallon video around about a decade ago, it's one of those. I think it was a short video that she had done. I think she was being interviewed at the time, from memory. So yeah, so if you find one of those, you more than likely find her explanation of that, or covering that. So fats that come through as chylomicrons will basically go to the adipose tissue, can drop a bit off. Depends on the signaling, what's happening. If there's too much nutrients and too much fuel in the bloodstream, obviously it will offload more. If there's less, then it's probably not going to have much left, as it's gone already around the body, and it will basically go straight to the liver and get the golden key to open up the receptor from the HDL, and then go in there. And if there's sugar in there, which is impeding, and so that means if there's sugar in the system, that means, obviously insulin is higher. You don't get gluconeogenesis. You don't get basically sort of ketones. So basically then it will get re-exported as VLDL. So very low density lipoproteins. Then basically the VLDL goes to IDL as it's losing stuff, and then LDL. And then eventually it'll basically get recycled as well. So it usually comes back to HDL, passes on. Some of the actual lipid circulates around with more cholesterol in it, because it actually also has a reparative role. And then once it's finished that sort of cycle, then it will go back and get recycled through the LDL receptors. So yeah, there's a lot of variations between people, because there are genetics that drive this. And as Bart would say, leave the genetics to do their work. It's not for us to tell the body that's been doing for thousands of years what to do. But no, triglycerides are not necessarily carbs. You can still generate some triglycerides, and when you actually release fats also, they do get released in similar ways. So both when you store them and all that. So it depends. Fat can be, come from a number of different sources. It can be endogenously created, or it come from exogenous, and then if it's excess, be recirculated as VLDL. So it's complicated. I mean, I know in the low carb community there's this sort of simplistic story, but it's not really. There's a lot of energy that's moving around, being regulated, being repackaged and sent out and stuff like that. So in that regard, but generally, if you're in a glucose burning mode, oxidizing mode, or burning mode, we'll use the generic. Or basically, I mean, we all understand that all these things are oxidized within your mitochondria, but we'll use the generic word of burning. Whether it's you're burning your primary fuel is glucose, or you're burning your primary fuel, that also has an effect on the type of triglyceride exports and all that. Generally speaking, when we're looking at the release of free fatty acids and glycerol, you basically will take, when those triglycerides come out, the body will cleave off basically to generate the sugar, the endogenous sugar. So oxaloacetate, that'll basically be utilized as well, and that will restrict the ability to use long chain fats. So that will actually, as a consequence, create more ketones as well. So that's the other side of the coin, because basically, you've got the backbone has to be used for sugar. The other free fatty acids are going to be used for ketones largely in that regard. But it really depends. It's that's a simplistic picture, but it's far more complicated. The body can reconfigure stuff, re-export stuff, move it around. There's a lot of signaling that's happening, trying to tell the body where are we in sort of in homeostasis, even insulin, even peripheral resistance when you're in a ketogenic state is only at the GLUT4 receptor. That means it's not taking in, so it can actually prioritize fats. So it's not real resistance. It's only basically, and it's the same thing when you're basically on a glucose, like a vegan diet or on a glucose diet. The GLUT4 receptor is the prioritized receptor rather than the lipolysis receptor. So in a sense, there is resistance there as well because you're not engaging the Randall cycle, but it's peripheral resistance of different receptors. Because different fuel prioritization, because that's what you've decided to do. So there's a lot of differences the way these things play out. And then your genetics, there are going to be differences between people. And it's the reason why some people, even on a vegan diet, don't lose as much fat as compared to another person because of those genetic differences in the way triglycerides are managed and other things. It's a U curve. It's not, sort of, I know it's explained in a very simplistic way out there by many people, but it's not really. It's a sort of a more complicated, interactive picture of energy substrates moved around, being reconverted, repackaged, resent out and stuff like that, or restored. And then, when things go down and the sensory molecules are saying, oh, we need more, dump more out. So it can actually have this sort of energy flux. So it's a bit more of an energy flux type thing, and then repackaging depending on what the requirements are. So I know it sounds a bit complicated, but it's not as complicated as I've made it out to sound. But I think I've covered your initial question anyway about triglycerides and carbs. Not only those. Okay. We know the narrative about the career like Owen's is bullshit, exactly. Are other zones reports also false? Largely, unfortunately, they are. And we know even from the 7-day Adventist studies, they actually talk about people in that region basically eating meats. So even amongst their own, which is prohibited supposedly by their religion, people in that area are consuming meats. And the funny thing is, when you remember the study that Bart showed, some people that are basically eating more meats are doing better than some people that are eating less. And there are other groups that are eating in between meats that are doing, worse than the ones that are not having a lot of meat at all. Who knows why? It's definitely not the meat, because if it was linear, the more you increase the meat, it was linear, rather than being up and down like that. It means that it's a scatter plot, not real correlation at all, strong correlation of any sort. There's none whatsoever. So what's left? It's probably other confounding variables amongst that group. But even that group is not a pure vegan or pure, plant-based. So, maybe they consume a bit less, but still it's all fucking all over the place, confounded, and it's all questionnaires, and that's how it's based. And remember, a lot of things are not even asked on the questionnaires. Remember, we talked about it before, how even in the EURASIA, they only talk about meat. And, in Greek, there is no word for meat. That's only beef. And then also they don't talk about the other foods like pork and stuff like that. They don't have all these other categories. So it's very restrictive. It seems to promote the plants more, has more entries to be able to write about plants. And that's deliberate. I mean, there's not even in the Greek one, which, I mean, we consume about as much dairy or a lot of dairy products, but as much milk as, remember I showed the stats back in the 2017 stats, back in the video that I did, the chat with Bart ages ago. And if you look at that, the Greeks more or less were drinking nearly as much milk as the Swiss. But there's not even an entry in the Icarian, even though they are pastoralists, they've got their own goats and sheep, there wasn't even an entry for milk. I mean, what sort of fucking study is that? And that's the problem. These studies are basically, they are focused on the plants and they've got minimal entries for the others. So people just don't answer those because they're asked to fill those in. People just, are ignorant. They just basically look at that and say, oh, that, yeah, that, not this. And so what they do is then they skew, they adjust, which is basically they fraudulently modify the data and basically say that they're, if they're not having all these, they must be having these in larger quantities. And that's how they manipulate and make out that these people are eating a vegetarian or plant-based diet, which is false. You can set up studies to come up with any result when you deliberately omit other entries and other things, and that's what they do. So it's garbage. Epidemiology is garbage. It's run by vegtards. If you take a look at all these people who are doing the studies, what's his name, Walter Willits from Harvard. He's actually on the board of the Seventh-day Adventists. So is Ornish, so is all these other people. They're all corrupt. They're all a gang, a mafia of vegans and vegtards. The majority of the USDA committee is made up of vegtards. And basically all they do is deliberately omit things. That's why they don't use any clinical or randomized control studies. They all use all these epidemiological garbage studies that their mates do at Harvard and a few other universities, and then just peddle the same garbage. That's what's happening. We're being lied, guys. Oh, shock, horror. These people are criminals. This is why Bart calls them criminals. They're corrupt people. They are very corrupt individuals, and they deliberately skew and manipulate data. And they use epidemiology, which is garbage science. No epidemiologist outside nutrition would accept something less than 2 has any significance. It's statistical noise. There is no risk. When it comes to tobacco smoking, it's 15 to 30, the odds ratio. That's thousands of orders of magnitude. And that's what all other epidemiologists out there would use, people like virologists and people like that. If you ask them, they say like 2 or less or 3 or less is nothing. It's statistical noise. It's insignificant. And these people are talking about 1.17 and 1.18 for meat. Give us a break. That's set 1.17. That's just statistical noise. Not even enough to wank yourself with. It's just garbage. This is why when you do randomized controlled clinical studies, you find the exact opposite. Christopher Gartner, randomized controlled trial for 12 months. Atkins, Ornish, Learn diet, and the Zone diet. What did he find? Atkins superior on every front, wiped out the competition. And that's a randomized control study done by a veg-tarded academic out of Stanford University. Christopher Gartner's on one of those boards of these groups, of the veg-tarded groups. Now he's doing some bullshit studies because basically he doesn't want to basically upset his other mates. He did this study because out of his ignorance, he actually believed that meat was bad. So he actually included in this study Atkins. It's like that other idiot academic that went to Israel and out of Harvard and deliberately added. She was a younger researcher, so she wasn't part of the mafia, so to speak. And out of her ignorance, she got money for the Israelis to do the direct study and add the Atkins component, because initially it was only the low-fat Learn diet, which is the nutritional diet, and the high-fat Mediterranean diet that the Israelis were promoting. So those two were done. And then they added that, and lo and behold, the Atkins trumped in both studies, which were both, and that one, the direct study was done over 2 years and with a follow-up of 5 years, and also a large part of the food was actually given by, so it was even better controlled than even the one that Christopher Gartner did. But even Christopher Gartner's was pretty good compared to others, because what he did is he got a nutritionist in, gave them the book, and actually educate them how to follow the book and how to apply the book religiously. A lot of them sort of fell off the wagon mid-year onwards, and that's why the differences narrowed. But in the first 6 months where they were more compliant, It was dramatic, the difference between Atkins and the other three. It just blew the other ones out of the water. And that's randomized controlled trial. It's not basically something which is, made up with questionnaires and bullshit. That's why this committee that does the food guidelines and all that, they don't even use Christopher's research, the ANZ study, or the direct study. Even though they were involved, they've disowned their own study. Why? Because they didn't get the result they wanted. Doesn't that sound familiar? Remember, Ansel Keys? He was involved in a study which they then hid for 2 decades, again, because it didn't help support their narrative about seed oils. Bunch of fucking crackpots and dodgy, corrupt individuals that have got supporting vested interests. So that's how we need to look at stuff. Let's stop basically arguing from a position of as if these people have credibility. We need to expose them. We shouldn't be basically arguing, oh, now what's wrong with this pitch or their studies? It's not what's wrong, it's just fucking corrupt and garbage. And their conclusions are garbage, and their statistics are manipulated and garbage. They're fraudulent, as Bart would agree with me on that. Let's stop basically arguing, oh, is this correct or not? No, it's fraud of the highest order. These people are corrupt. They're basically charlatans and are actually pushing agendas, misanthropic agendas. They are garbage, and we should point this out quite clearly and stop basically, playing their game. When taking B to restore gut bacteria, stores bought synthetic vitamins effective? We're talking about B vitamins now. Get a good quality one. That means it shouldn't have folic acid. It should have methylfolate, methylcobalamin. It should basically have all the proper stuff, which means it may be a bit more expensive, but that's what you get. And the pantothenic acid should only be 50 or less milligrams, not more. The pantothenic acid is the issue. If it's too high for too long, you'll induce insomnia and other overvitaminosis. And the reason for that is because we store pantothenic acid compared to the other B vitamins, we store more. And I've actually done already a video on pantothenic acid with Bart. It's on his website if you want to go and check it out on some old research which shows exactly why the body stores it and how it does it and stuff like that. It was well documented with good research back then. I'm not going to cover it now. Let's move on. You know where to find it and go and check. Nah, not really. Yep, absolutely, Harry. I love goat cheese. Yes, Dave, exactly. Yep, exactly. That's the sort of stuff that I enjoyed and I miss because they really have good quality stuff up in the village. We used to, nice fish and nice goat meat and all that sort of stuff. Yes, very nice. The advanced orthomolecular, what is it called, research, the AOR one, you'll find it on iHerb. It's 15 milligrams. So you'll find it on iHerb and you'll find it on, so AOR. And make sure it's there, because they've got 2 versions, make sure it's the version with 15 milligrams of MK4, not the other one. We don't want the MK7. What dose of daily should be taken? Who's deficient and maybe pounds overweight, probably 10,000 IUs, especially in winter. So that's what I would take. if you're normal weight or underweight, 5,000 IUs. If you're excessively overweight, I would do probably 100,000 IUs for a couple of weeks. But I would also take MK4 with it, just because of the high levels. And I would also increase my retinol to balance some of that out as well. G'day, Sarah. Good to see you. Bjorn, good to see you, mate. Yes, it is. Plenty of crackpots. It's a great industry. Good money earner for those who getting the checks from the food industry. Yes, exactly. Mind-blowing. Not even a trance experience will basically save you. That's one way of putting it. Oh, yes. Yes. Vegetarians love fairy stories. They are soy boys after all. I love it when Harry gets passionate about exposing lies. Oh, thank you, Ness. Yes, I do. Blinky also gets a bit fuzzy. He's fuzzy in the head as well. All taurine supplements synthetic. I believe I heard Ken Berry say that. Pretty much, unfortunately. Yes, they are. But as I said, you keep your supplements down to the bare minimums ones that you really require. So you can actually put. I mean, if you're eating a species appropriate diet, even the small amount of in the actual taurine supplement, the small amount of deuterium, it's going to be balanced out with the higher amount of low deuterium fats and animal products in general. So it's less of a problem. It's only when you basically start introducing a whole lot of plant compounds like you would get in some of the other paleo, in particular, those sort of diets where you're basically increasing the deuterium component in that. So, but the small amount that you're having, a couple of grams here or there, the small quantities, it's insignificant to be true. But unfortunately, there are some companies. See, the biggest problem is extracting from bovine directly. You can do it with proteins and stuff like that, but and they're expensive. It would become prohibitively expensive. It'd probably end up being 4 times the cost. So, yeah, it wouldn't be very competitive in the marketplace. That's the simple reason why they're all synthetic. I don't care. That's his business. Once he gets too old and his body can't synthesize enough of it, he'll be the one declining faster than me. And what's his reason for not? He must have a reason. He must be able to argue a specific reason. I can argue from the deuterium side, but that's about it. And that goes for all supplements when it comes to deuterium, the whole lot. That's why I don't recommend lifelong supplementation. It's strategically used for certain amount of periods, but there are some that you can't get away with, like taurine biosynthesis drops. It's just a reality. You either take it or you basically accelerate the decline. I'm not interested in accelerating the decline. Dr. Greger is a god for the vegans. He's the epitome of vegan perfection. Fucking hell he is. Have you seen him? What a man. If I was a woman, I'd be swept away. I'd have to be a blind woman, but Did you see Carnivore Yogi's video introducing some vegetables? No, I didn't, but it doesn't surprise me. She was heading in that direction. It was only a matter of time. But I think she's still doing primarily carnivore. She's only introducing some, and it's sort of low carbish style. So, but still, is it species appropriate? Nah, and most of her issues are electrolytes. So with a bit of taurine, she could and more salt, she could have basically better regulated all that sort of stuff. Anyway, how's the sciatica? Oh, much better, much better. Actually, hit me in the knee. I didn't realise because I had a lot of the sciatic pain. I didn't realise that actually because I actually injured myself by nearly slipping but not falling over, and I put a lot of compression. So the muscles on my side of my leg, sort of both sides, sort of tensed up, and the knee sort of was sort of like locked, and I put a lot of compression power on that. Pinched the sciatic nerve at the base, at the bottom of my spine, and the muscles that are there. So, and then pretty much, once that dissipated, I noticed it was more pain in my leg, those muscles that are going right down to my knee, and basically my knee. Those muscles on the side, I've basically sort of exercised them out, with a rolling pin to basically sort of desensitize them and sort of reduce the amount of. They tend to tighten up very much. So doctor checked and saw that the ligaments are all good, so there's no damage with the ligaments. They're very strong, she said, so there's not an issue there. But she said it's probably because of the compression, it's probably inflamed the whole joint, and that will take a week or so to basically, because I'm 55. She said you're not a young spring chicken, so it'll take a bit longer to sort of settle down and all that. And it's still there's a bit of lingering there after a week, so it's bloody annoying. But what do? You get on with it. But yes, getting much better. Yeah, pretty much it is a business, and a very lucrative business for some. That is the truth. What about magnesium? No, I wouldn't bother with magnesium. Check my videos, Dylan. Check my videos. People, please stop talking about magnesium. I'm not going to answer questions of magnesium. I've made videos on magnesium. You excrete 120 milligrams per day. You do not need to supplement magnesium. Humanity is not supplemented. You get it from the food. All you need to do is get enough salt to basically maintain your electrolyte balance and your fluids in the right sort of situation. So you retain water and all the other electrolytes, and you don't excrete or dump electrolytes as long as you've got enough sodium there to keep it all there, especially when your insulin comes down, because that's the other thing that holds a lot of that stuff in. So please stop bothering me about magnesium. It's bullshit. What we need is to basically eat species appropriate and get sufficient sodium to keep it all together, so to speak, like humans have been doing for a very, very long time. We've talked about that. Thank you, Mousy. It is 7 o'clock. Shut the eyes and switch. And Roy's here. G'day, boys. What's Blinky come up? He's got another good one here. Let's see what other. Not even enough to wank yourself with. Thanks, Blinky, for reminding me. Not even enough to wank yourself with. Not even enough to wank yourself with. Not even enough to wank yourself with. Oh, fuck off. It stopped. Anyway, fun and frivolities. Did that actually come up or not? Was that actually appearing on the screen? Oh, the friggin' hell is playing up. Ah. That's weird. I don't know why it's... Fuck if I know what the fuck is happening. That's weird. Don't know what happened there. Blinky. Not even enough to wank yourself with. Not even enough to wank yourself with. No, now it's bloody working. Not even enough to wank yourself with. Not even enough to wank yourself with. Ah, yes, yes. Yeah. Oh well, whatever. Doesn't hold on to that. I don't know why. It's annoying. Oh well, shit happens. We got a bit of fun out of it. Thanks, Blinky. Oh well, you know, fucking hell. There are many things that are synthetic, plastic, synthetic. You know, a whole lot of other things. Let's get over it. That's not an argument. It's synthetic. I mean, prosthetic arm is synthetic. You want to use your arm if you've lost it. You know, I mean, that's not an argument. You know, I can make an argument which is credible, which is basically as long as it's clean, like the actual thing is actually completely clean, it's not a problem. It doesn't have any other fillers or crap like that. So pure taurine is only what I recommend. Pharmaceutical grade, 100% taurine, not a problem. The only thing is you get a bit of deuterium, but the small quantity you're having, you know, we're talking about one or a couple of grams. You know, we're not talking about like a steak, 100 grams, which has a certain level of deuterium. That only has very small amount of deuterium. We're talking about a couple of parts per million, very small amount for the quantity you're using. So it's irrelevant. But at the same time, as we said, if you're consuming a lot of supplements, a lot of foods that are high in deuterium, they all like accumulate, especially in winter when you don't have UV to get rid of it as effectively. So that's what we're talking about. But generally speaking, that's not an argument. It's nonsense. Have you seen the guys? Yep, yeah. I have. It's all crack pottery. I actually had on the earlier video today, we actually went through some of the points that he was making. They're just garbage. That nothing is that they can't. Any of the arguments can't be validated with science, with good science we're talking about, or mechanism. It's just garbage. You know, that guy's gonna. He's basically doing what he's doing is basically a low fat diet. So he's replaced all fat with lean protein, and basically fructose, which is high deuterium. So let him age faster than he would normally. Bad luck for him. You know, gone away from, and he'll basically also become deficient in critical fat soluble vitamins because protein from food also requires a number of critical fat soluble vitamins to basically be utilized more effectively by the body. So he's shooting himself in the foot for whatever crazy, stupid ideas, which is probably repeat-related garbage. I've already covered this point in the previous live stream. Go and check it out. It annoys me. I'm not going to talk about it. Ah, yes, nothing like deuterium-laden crap, which was only seasonal initially. Ah, somebody's laughing. Oh, g'day, Bert. How are you, mate? Good to see you here. Another child recently died, named Cameron, forced to eat a vegan diet 7 months old. Doesn't surprise me. When the body has, if you take a look at what's in mother's milk, it's proteins, even the sugars, some of those sugars basically, what is it, about 17% of the mother's sugars, about there, actually get converted to be utilized in a number of other processes. So it's not even used as fuel in a sense. And then you've basically got all the other important factors in there, enzymes, other components that are very important for the child, critical, critical things like, a really good quality amino acid, the important fat-soluble vitamins that are required to regulate the enzymes that actually are building tissue and, bone and muscle and all that. Because remember, we talk about the regulating the collagen enzymes by the fat-soluble vitamins. It's the reason why the facial, all these things. Weston A. Price talked about the importance of fat-soluble vitamins. When you deny the child these important factors at the critical moments of growth and also importance of fats for brain development, what do you think you're going to do? You're going to kill a child. So it does not fucking surprise me. These people should be locked away, and the people that are promoting this sort of diet should be, anyway. I'm talking about some nastier things. It requires a wall and somebody using something against them. You know what I mean? That's what they deserve, these fucking criminals. Does deuterium in protein matter if you're not really using it for energy? Look, deuterium basically matters in all sources, but as long as it's within the 100 to 130, that's fine. Fat tends to be at the lower end. Protein tends to be at the higher end. When you basically, and also the importance is, if it's grain-based, it'll be over 140. If it's basically grass-fed, that means the animal is eating grass, the meat will be lower in deuterium. So how high the deuterium content of the meat depends on what the animal was eating. Was it eating grass, which is low deuterium food, or was it eating grains, which is high deuterium food? Remember, grains are about 155 parts per million. So it's way out of the sweet spot of 130, which is your top. You also deplete with UV. Every hour you deplete about 19 parts per million. The more of your skin you're exposing, the more you'll deplete. I'm not recommending you run around naked in the city. You're likely to get locked up. The best way is just to keep away from deuterium heavy laden foods, which is basically sugary foods. At the end of the day, your body can manage, if you just eat a steak and all that, even if it's grain fed in a sense, you're going to be in the sweet spot automatically. You're going to be below 130 parts per million. Because remember, even the body has enzymatic pathways to get rid of deuterium, to deuterium deplete. The problem is when you load the body with too much deuterium foods, you overwhelm the body's ability to do that. So don't worry about just because meat has more, not a problem, as long as you basically are not overburdening it with too much deuterium from carbohydrates and stuff like that. So that's the critical part. But if you're having basically 1-to-1 meat and protein, that's probably the most optimal. So, but if you're not, you're still not going to be that bad. You'll probably be at about 125 to 127. You're still below the 130. Where if you're having, a 1-to-1, you're probably going to be below around the 120 or sub 120. And then if you're having grain-fed meat, you're probably going to be, again, slightly higher, even when you're eating more fat. It's just because of the grains in the actual protein part. So it can vary in that regard. Anyway, so where were we? Sean Baker on Instagram reported Biden wants to allow Americans to eat one burger a month. Part of conducting meat eating for the climate idiots. Yeah, basically just crap. We talked about it in the earlier one. Yep, it's the same sort of garbage, a different day. I mean, as I said in the earlier one, the guy can't even walk up the stairs of Air Force One without tripping over. He'll end up basically hurting himself. Somebody needs to stick a bone up his ass to sort of stabilise him. Oh, well, it's a bit of comedy. Carny comedy. Yes. They're into that. They're into that sort of alternative, living approaches and, orientations and whatever else. You can play with anything you like in that community. Anyway, yes, it's all fucking nonsense in that regard. More shit, different day, more crap in that regard. So, yes, as if these are the arguments, as I pointed out this morning, you can use. When somebody comes and tells you this, you turn around and say, how come in the 70s, when the climate was much cooler and we were talking about heading for a new ice age, our beef stocks in America were much higher, and so were they worldwide. And now the beef stocks are basically more or less the same, but lower in America. So how come then they weren't a problem they are today? So there's no argument, it's just ridiculous. And let alone there's less ruminants, wild ruminants, because they've been displaced even more since then. So there's even less ruminants on the planet, both wild and domestic. And even their own veg-tarded ecologists, academics, say there are less. So where's the fucking extra? It's been declining. There's a chat that I did with Bart K. Check on my chats with Bart K list, not the live stream ones, the other ones, and grab the methane one. There's the study also about the type of methane that's in the atmosphere. It's not carbon-12, it's carbon-13, which is coming from oil and gas. The carbon-12 from animals has been declining since the 70s. It's bullshit. Let alone that's the one that the plants can utilize much more effectively, which works within the carbon and methane cycle. So it's garbage, guys. It's absolutely garbage and false. Animals, especially if they're pastured, actually will net positively store both carbon and methane, even though they are not an issue as far as I'm concerned. But even if they were, they can still net positively. So it's bullshit, and there's plenty of science out there to say that. But in general, there's been a decline. So where's the problem? Where are these people finding the problem when it's been declining? I mean, we're consuming 30% of our calories from animal products now compared to 50% in the 70s. And there's less of a problem then, and now there's more of a problem. So there is no correlation. It's like that. It's not linear. It's not basically linear like that. Animal consumption and, methane and carbon. It's like that. It's the complete opposite. Basically, the reduction in animals and the increase in methane coming from, you know what I mean. That's why I've done it like that. In the other way, coming from basically oil and gas and coal. It's just a beat up. It's crap, you know. So, and I show all the information, and you can actually see all the stats, which are USDA stats based on how many cattle there were and stuff like that. It's garbage. That's all you need to argue. Say there were more then, less now. So we're the argument, and also on the health side, we ate more then and less now, and we're more sicker now. Don't argue with them science because it just goes over people's heads. Just point out the obvious nonsensical argument that they're putting. We need to be aggressive, as I said in the earlier live stream. We need to be aggressive in using points. We don't need to basically try to argue science because these people are basically just science deniers. They are the real science deniers, and also the crackpots that make up shit with their epidemiological shit and everything else. They manipulate the data, and they've actually infiltrated all these organisations to push their agendas. That's the reality. What we need to do is to make sure that we actually, for the average person out there, we make the argument. We say, well, there was over 1 billion cattle in the world and over 100 million in the US. And now there is less in the world and there is less than 100 million in America. So why is cattle the problem now when it was cooler in the 70s and it's hotter now? You know, how can you have less animals and that be the cause? It's nonsense. The average punter out there, the average person, if you say that to them, they will agree with you. It's bullshit. It can't be. You know, that's how we need to argue these things. The same thing about our health. We were consuming 50% animal foods in the 70s. Now we're consuming 30 or less, and we're sicker. That's how we need to argue these points, not the way we try to argue through studies. People don't listen. People want bite-sized arguments. We just need to make them look idiots, that their arguments are basically not based on reality. And be more aggressive in the way in a nice way and condescending like I am. I like to be very condescending when I'm treating with those sort of people. Nice to the others that are listening and very condescending to the people that are putting the stupid arguments. Anyway, I've heard that in red meat there are up to 50,000 different active components. Do you believe this is true? Yep, I do. That was an easy one. But an American. Gotta love Sleepy Joe. Ah, yes, what a fellow. He only did one good thing, basically exposing the Armenian genocide. So that I applaud. He was the first president to at least have the balls to do the right thing where nobody else did. But yes, his veganity will end up causing him dementia. Definitely will speed it up. But on that front, and as I said, you know, I'm not hostile against it. I've got nothing against the Turkish people. At the end of the day, there are other people that are suffering. They're being manipulated, like most people, by their elites. It's their elites that basically have expansionist ideas, and Erdogan and people like that want to create their new neo-Ottoman Empire and conquer the world. You know, they've got, you know, bigger boots than their finances. But the reality is they've got this sort of wish list of being re-emerging as a middle power. So, yes, the delusions of grandeur is what Erdogan has, and he's pretty much treating his people like shit and starving them to basically pile in money into his military and to build hospitals around in other countries to gain influence while his people are struggling to get cheap enough food. So yes, so I'm glad that basically, because the reality is people people don't realise, actually, as I pointed out in the earlier video, the Germans, their first genocide was basically not with the Jews. The first genocide was in Namibia, where they killed a lot of natives there. And then they actually even assisted and instructed the Turks how to kill off Armenians. And then the final solution were with the Jews. So basically, they've had an illustrious history of genocide, the German people, and it's only when the Americans dragged them through their own killing fields and showed them exactly what they had done that it basically shamed them sufficiently to not ever, and actually now teach their own people that this was wrong, which is a good thing. The Turks haven't learnt that lesson. Nobody's ever shamed them or forced them to basically own up to their criminal past behaviour. And still today, even one Turkish friend of mine actually told me that in Turkish schools, they still teach kids, young kids, even in primary school, that it was the Armenians' fault, as if the victim is at fault for his own genocide. I mean, for fuck's sake, that's how crazy some of this sort of stuff is. But yes, it's true. It's a bit like the Chinese government. The victim basically they're the perpetrators. They need to be dealt with. Yeah, that's a sort of similar garbage. As I remind people, we're all humans. At one point in time, we nearly got snuffed out. There was about 1,000 or 10,000 of us. We are very genetically similar, like the what's the other animal? The cat. The cheetah is very common because they have very small gene pool variation compared to other animals. So we, like the cheetah, have very little. Skin, that's surface deep. That's just melanin adjustment, adaptation, nothing. As far as humans, we have very little differences amongst ourselves. We're all children of Africa. We've just developed different cultures. There's nothing wrong with maintaining culture and language and all that. We should pride ourselves in the rich diversity as a species that we have. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But at the same time, we have to remind ourselves that we're all humans and we all are children of Africa, and we need to jettison some of these toxic ideas that the elites try to divide and rule and basically use us as cannon fodder for their nasty little wars, because that's what they basically want. They want to basically throw people into their killing fields to fight their little wars of expansion, to win new markets so their elites can gain more against the other elites. Basically psychopaths that basically use the rest of us as cannon fodder. So now you know why I hate politicians, why I hate the elites, and why I believe in direct democracy and stripping these arseholes of their power. But yes, it's going to take a while before humans wake up to themselves and realise how they've been had for a long time. But anyway, that's another point. I'm planning to do a video on totalitarianism and how these different groups manipulate people with fear. They use fear to manipulate people. You've got to understand this. It's it's been used by many people for a very, very long time. Yes, the kingdom of Satan, yes, very much. It's basically, they've been using these methods and the way they actually manipulate, you have to understand, is look at the fear methods that are even used now with, the recent stuff. If you basically if you try to cause fear to people constantly, you desensitize them. But if you fear them, stop, give them a bit of a breather, then fear them again a bit more, then stop, give them a bit of a breather, you intensify the fear and the paranoia and the ability to manipulate their minds, because they're not thinking logically. They become like schizophrenic in their thinking patterns. And that's what's happening to the majority of the population. You see people literally being mad and crazy against others, or giving people the evil look if they're not wearing a mask or stuff like that. They're paranoid and crazy and easily to control by the elites, to be told what to do. It's the old method. It's been used countless times by elites to slowly control the population. It's nothing new. Through escalation of fear. But also you have to have a bit of, leeway because people become desensitized. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to do a video on that to sort of cover the psychology of the elites and how they've operated through history of fear and manipulation and all that. And how also we'll go into how they use like sort of demigod or now aliens or demigod type concepts to basically to push that into the population to create fear and, we can't oppose them because that's far too powerful, far untouchable. Remember, we're the majority, they're the minority. They need to create that to keep us under control, to keep themselves in luxury. Anyway, let's move on. Chinese government probably happy. Yes. Happy campers over there. Yes. And his vice president, Miss Commissar. Yes, and that. Is there beneficial compounds? Yes, we talked about that earlier. There's plenty. And that would be a long, probably requires a video at some point. As if carbon footprint ever mattered. Exactly. As I've said, if you look at the recent weather patterns and stuff like that, I mean, my hypothesis is basically that the magnetosphere weakening and the reversal of the poles is basically creating where currently, where is the current magnetic north? It's been moving around quite a bit recently. It's been jumping all over the place from Siberia to Alaska to northern Canada. It's been all over the place. It's on a trip around the northern hemisphere. But I mean, even in one case, it was even in the middle of Canada somewhere. It actually got quite south in that regard. So it's been jumping all over the place. I don't know whether there's going to be a polar reversal. I hope not in my lifetime. Otherwise we'll have to all put UV block on. It's going to be a difficult time. But pretty much we'll survive it as we've survived. All species have survived it before, but there's probably going to be a slight reduction. And, probably it's going to be pretty dangerous for the current population of people who have already got a lot of sickness and lack of robustness to basically be exposed to much higher levels of radiation. So not a good thing. But that's why another good reason to stay on a species-appropriate diet to, just in case something like that happens within our lifetime. At the same time, what it's allowing is more solar radiation. And the greenhouse gases, the key greenhouse gases, even in the same frequencies as carbon and methane, is basically water vapor and basically clouds. So they will take most of it anyway. So it's irrelevant. If more's coming in because of the weakening of the magnetosphere, it's irrelevant what we do. Absolutely irrelevant, So let's just get over it. And it's not going to make much difference. When you're talking about a few parts per million, when there's all these other parts per million that are basically taking up energy. So even if you take all the carbon out, all the methane out, there's still enough particles that are greenhouse molecules to take up that energy. So it's irrelevant completely. Yes, they are greenhouse gases, but they're so small and insignificant, they've never correlated through history. The only reason why, when temperatures start to rise rapidly, if you take a look at history, when temperatures rise not as dramatic but much slower, what happens is the correlation between carbon and temperatures is very much disconnected. When the temperature rises more rapidly, because of this magnetosphere thing, that's when they correlate far more and it always, carbon follows temperature. Why? Because we've been told a lie by many crackpots out there. And if you ask any physicist, you go to any university or contact any physicist and ask them, Does hot water or cold water hold carbon? A true physicist will tell you cold water holds more carbon than hot water, which basically means as that temperature, because of the radiation coming in, heating up slightly, it's basically releasing more carbon from the oceans. That's where it's coming from. So ours is a small percentage of that total amount, so it's irrelevant. And this whole thing about acidification of the oceans is bullshit, because we're actually losing more out of the oceans. It's only when the oceans cool in some areas, like in the northern hemisphere in the wintry period, that more carbon gets stored in that colder water. And then they go and make measurements at that time and say, oh, look, acidification has increased. Bullshit. It's crap. You know, the bullshit that these people play on us is incredible. So, yeah, what can one say? And, you know, the actual amount of storage is it's pulsatile through with seasonal. It's seasonal. It increases, decreases, increases, decreases because of that seasonality in different parts of the world as well. What can one say? Drives you crazy. Oops. Is there no milk better than conventional milk of 4%? Yep. Look, a lot of the raw milks are between 4 and 6. The one that I get, the raw milk, is 5.1 fat. Well, probably 4 is the, you know, most of the conventional milk will be around about 3 point, what is it? 3 point something, 3.4 to 4. Most of the conventional 4.1, the most conventional stuff is pasteurized. The low fat stuff is 2.5 or less. The light, or whatever they call it, that shit. So where are you located on the planet at the same time is the other question. Yeah, so I would say if you can't get, you could probably add a bit of, you could basically put a bit of milk, add a bit of water, and add a bit of cream, and sort of dilute and change the composition of it. I used to do that. Now I just don't bother. Sometimes I'll use a raw milk and put a bit of cream, and that'll be it. Not much other solution for you if you can't access higher fat milk. Search around, do a Google search, see what you come up with in your area. G'day, Margaret. Government knows it's not about meat. This Bill Gates has his cronies taking control of us. Yep, pretty much. Yes, he is. After all, he is the richest American, is he? Or second richest, one of the two. But the other ones are no better. They're just in the same boat with him, pushing the same agendas and all that sort of stuff. I bet he's enjoying really some really good grass-fed meats while he's trying to push kibble on the rest of us. You know, I mean, if you take a look, peasant food, you know, the old, you know, keep them on kibble, keep them docile and under control. Very much that's how it was in the past. Nothing new. They're just reinventing it now and bringing it back because, unfortunately, now they're in such debt and the whole system is basically in quagmire. They need to create a technocratic society to control everyone and feed them kibble to make them docile, fearful and docile. Not going to do it to me. Fucking hell. Crazy. I hope that you're out there protesting, Alex. And the other thing is, send to politicians. Send the information to politicians. We've got information. We know how these people operate. We've got the randomized control studies. We've got the sort of stuff. Send it to your politicians. Say, look at this. These people are talking bullshit. Send them that other study that I talk about, which is the methane one. Send them the information in your country. Get the information out. I do. Get the information to people who basically can then present it in Parliament and say, hold on, you guys are crackpots or listening to crackpots. Here's research that contradicts that garbage. We need to fight back, and we need to basically make it clear to people that that is bullshit. Let's stop basically. And the Eat Lancet, that bitch up in Norway, I hope Bjorn is doing a bit of work up there to basically expose that bitch with her misanthropic bullshit. That rich, yes, hope he is. She's a nasty piece of work. Needs to be exposed. And her husband's no better. He's a bastard that needs to have his ass kicked. I think they're still together, are they? I can't remember now. Don't know. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. Who knows? I think they were a couple of years back, but yes. They are sitting down, yes. Unfortunately, it's bad. Hopefully with our friend, we won't have to get to that sort of level of carnage in the area. But anyway, I do have family in Greece and I'd prefer things didn't go that way. Yes. Yes, very much. This is a fallen realm after all. Turkey is trying to buddy up with Ukraine now. Putin won't be happy about that. Yeah, look, Turkey, there's an old saying that the Arabs have about the Turks. They say, never turn your back on a Turk. Strategically, I can understand why this happens. They've had to confront, on the one hand, Russia to the north, the Arabs to the south, east, and then basically Greeks and Western Europe on the other side. And there's always been rivalries of one sort or whatever. And that's why they've had to learn to play one against the other, befriend one, turn against the other, play. They're very transactional, the Turks. That means they try and extract as much benefits because they don't trust any of them. So the Turks are for the Turks, and that's why they've lost credibility within NATO and within the European Union for that reason, in that regard. The problem is that the current leadership is a very dangerous leadership that could basically turn the whole fucking place into a nightmare for everyone. And I have relatives in Greece, and I wouldn't want that to happen. Maybe I have got my personal reasons. I basically, don't really care whether they're in bed with Putin or whether they're in bed with the Ukrainians, as long as they leave us Greeks alone. They can go and play with the others as much as they like, as much mischief as they like. Turkey has plenty of problems internally, has massive economic problems, has a massive Kurdish population that wants independence, which is a large 30 million, and they're actually breeding at a higher rate because a lot of the poorer people are actually Kurds. The Turks have basically, more of them have moved into the middle classes. They sort of discriminate against the Kurds. And as a consequence, when you have more poorer people, they tend to breed more. So they've been outbreeding the Turks. And now the Turks are finding themselves, a lot of Turks also that live in other parts of the world and Europe have left, where there are less Kurds over abroad. So more of the Kurds are within the country. So they are making a bigger and bigger proportion of the population. They've got an internal bomb to go off within that population. So they've got a lot of problems. And I know the military in Greece is pretty good. Erdogan decimated the Air Force. Greek Air Force could take them out, as an Israeli Air Force pilot said, within 24 hours. They're better trained. They've actually trained with both sides, and they know who's best. So I don't fear Greece. It's the reason why Erdogan makes a lot of noise, but has never moved westerly, because he fears to move westerly. So he attacks weaker people along his borders to the east. But you can only do that for so long. At the end of the day, you need to maintain a credible economy and be able to feed your people. And if you can't do that, and you increase discontent, and then intercommunal discontent eventually that could pull apart your whole society. So things are not looking good for Turkey long term if they continue down that path. Their best option is basically to give the Kurds some autonomy, regional autonomy within the Turkish state, and at the same time respect their human rights and their rights. And in that way, they could diffuse a lot of these problems, but they're not willing to do that. It's unfortunately some of these leaders, it's either their way or the highway. It doesn't work in the end. It all falls apart, and they're heading for a collision with history. So it's not going to look good. I just hope that it doesn't spill over into the Aegean and affects my family, especially on my sister's side, who live on the island of Milos. So yes, most of my other family are on the west coast, so they're pretty safe over there. Ah, yes, nothing like it. Yes, install fear. We all have to get Arnie out there fighting the aliens while we eat kibble at home and go, hoo, go Arnie. Yes. Ah, yes, we definitely need. Yes, we need the crackpots at the World Economic Forum telling us how to be united against the alien threat and get Arnie out there to do the business. It's fucking hilarious. I mean, if it wasn't serious, you just laugh. It's so laughable. It's so ridiculous. Some of this stuff. God Almighty, it's crazy. The crazy world we're living in. Oh, that's okay, Trouble. Good to see you here. We'll get you to do dusters later on. But Mr. K didn't turn up. If he had, I would have thrown him a link and got him on to tell us a few stories. Oh, see the nice thing about Restream? It actually even congratulates me. Oh, how nice. Oh, thank you, Restream. StreamYard doesn't do that for me. Anyway, let's move on. After that self-congratulations. Hope your pain is better. Ah, yes, it is. It is. Is vitamin C in lemon chelated in any way? Not really. The only part of the lemon that actually has, I mean, the lemon juice doesn't have really much oxalate. Where the majority of oxalate is in the skin, the stuff that people sort of use to put into cake mixes and stuff like that, the skin, that's where most of the oxalate is. And even the pulp inside also doesn't have a lot of oxalate. It has a bit more than the juice, but not as much, the pulp. But the majority of it is in the skin in terms of oxalate. So as long as you're not using the skin and you're just basically using the juice, you're fine. And as I said, and the thing is, a good thing about lemon juice, you're getting vitamin C from lemons, which is unimpeded because you're on a low carbohydrate diet. And it's not excessive either. So a bit of lemon juice is okay. You'll get some of that stuff, probably not excessive enough to cause any issues in terms of oxalate. So it's not like taking a supplement. It's much lower. It's probably more than you need, generally speaking. But if you have lemon juice now and then, I usually have lemon juice now and then, and it's not for the vitamin C. I like to put lemon juice on pork. I don't use it on steak. On steak, I will basically put either a fried egg, and then which hasn't been overcooked, so the yolk can actually be broken up and cut it up and all that. Yummy. Or I'll use butter or stuff like that. It's only I do like lemon juice on my pork. chops. So that's where I use it. So basically, I've tended, because I've consumed a bit more pork nowadays, I tend to use a bit more lemon juice. That's the only reason, not for any other reason. So we get more than enough vitamin C from the animal foods, and I mean, milk's got shitloads of vitamin C. It's got the quantity in a couple of glasses of milk is more than, it's probably a couple of times what you require in a carnivore diet. Simple as that. So I get enough and probably from that excess, even from the lemon juice that I occasionally have, maybe I'm getting a bit, but the amount of oxalate is going to be so little. Plus the citric acid in the lemon juice sort of negates that anyway. So I'm not that concerned about any oxalate anyway. So yes. Yes. More lockdowns coming your way. Yes, it is exceptionally bright. That's why we have to push back and start pushing information to our, the alien threat bullshit was already used by Reagan in 83. Yes. I mean, these people are basically peddling even earlier than that to cover up things or to basically create the conditions. It's like in the past how many of the rulers were pushing a lot of these things about angels and stuff like that, again, to basically use these people to manipulate other people. Now they're using aliens or other things, or, then they use demons to basically fear people, saying, there are demons out there that are doing all this mischief and people are allying themselves. So, the witch hunts and all that sort of stuff. It was, again, that to control, create fear in the population and all that at a time when things were really bad economically and, with a plague and stuff like that. The same thing now. They're doing the same thing. They've been doing it for a long time, guys. This is not new. Everybody thinks it's new. It's not. It's been done, tried and tested multiple times in the past. It's just basically, this is the modern version, That's all it is. So they're not that smart, okay? These are just basically rulers that are psychopathic. They want to hold on to power. They want to control, and they fear us, and basically, they have to play these different cards to keep us under control. Yes. There's nothing like it. Yes, I'm more optimistic than other people. I think that in time, if we keep on trying to, in blogs and stuff like that, in all sorts of things, we start trying to get some information out there on radios or some information out there on basically on different things, write articles to newspapers. Sometimes they may accidentally go through the cracks. Don't be too conspiratorial. Be a bit more cunning in that regard to expose some of these lies, like the stuff that I said about the meat stuff. How we had more in the past and less now. How can that be a problem? Those little things that are not too controversial in the way they come across, but what they do is they erode their narrative. Be smart about it. Don't play into their bullshit. That's their bullshit. Aliens, lizard people, and all that. We ignore that completely. Let them play in that little pit of mischief and misinformation. We don't need to argue that crap. We don't need to argue against their epidemiological bullshit. What we need to do is expose the illogicality of their arguments. It's much easier to make that's more credible, and it sounds logical, and people, because it is logical, people, when they listen to it, they go, you're right, that's just bullshit. And as long as some people will read those comments to the editor, people will say, well, this is bullshit. And when they hear that sort of stuff, you bring it up in conversations and all that, over time it gets traction within the population. People start losing, because already they are a bit They don't trust a lot of these people. They're already a bit concerned about all the bullshit that's going around. They just don't know where to target the energy, so to speak. What you need to do is smart and target their energy and say, expose their lies in small bits and pieces here and there and allow them to target. We don't need to get into the conspiratorial too much like that, because that loses us credibility. Even though some of this may be true, it's not going to work with the average person. We need to be smarter the way we go about it. It's like basically some of the speculative stuff, like I said to Bart last time. Yes, there are these risks with the sort of vaccines and stuff like that. But at the same time, I think that it's going to be more the frail people and all that are going to be at the highest risk, and a lot of the numbers are going to be missed, and there's going to be it's due to other strains, or why more people are dying later on from cytokine storms or whatever. But at the end of the day, we need to basically keep it credible. Some things we can convince people on, some things we can't, because it's just too complicated to explain the biochemistry, to explain the potential risks. So what we can do is we can dial it back a bit and say, to protect more people so they don't basically succumb, we can say, well, up your vitamin D. This is what this study shows. They prevented cytokine storm in Spain, and more people didn't. Nobody died in that study and all that. So bring to their attention stuff where they can action things. At the end of the day, we want to get people to action things to protect themselves on the one hand, and on the other hand, point out these discrepancies in the narrative that they're pushing. That's a smart way of actually operating, because we're trying to win over the majority, or even if we don't win entirely the majority, at least make them question a bit the narrative. It will slow down the progress of these arseholes. That's what we're trying to achieve. Be smart about it, guys. It's not about, I have an opinion and I'm going to say it. We're trying to win the argument here, not trying to basically score an on goal. Because these people have been manipulated and brainwashed. We basically need to expose the kinks in that brainwashing. And that's not going to happen by too much conspiratorial. It's going to happen by just showing the discrepancies in the narrative here and there, and then they will slowly start pulling it to pieces themselves. That's the smart way. It's like insidiously undermining. That's how it works. Use their tactics against themselves. Be smart about it. And it's not as if we are dishonest. We are basically pointing out truths that can be validated, that they can't contradict because it's in the stats. So I'm not saying make things up. No, what I'm saying is basically use things that are credible but go against the narrative. That's what I'm saying. I still believe honesty is the best. Truth will always triumph in the end. Environmental NGOs are lovely vegetated people. Buying farmland to protect nature. Oh, yes. And fight climate change. Oh, definitely. Yes. Dr. Gregor, you are always right. Angry like a Turk. Okay. Yes, yes. Sinsom in Turk. I suspect that describes Erdogan perfectly. Yes. Nasty piece of work. Family had their DNA done. They are 40.5% Viking and are now brothers. Nice one, Bird. Uh, Bird and Bjorn. sitting around, songs and stories to be told. We can just give the alien like the War of the Worlds. You've been watching too many movies, Jules. Getting some really interesting ideas. Yes. Yes, 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 yes. Yes. Zombies always. Idiocracy was a documentary. Blinky, blinky, blinky. It doesn't surprise me you want to spank nurses with a duster. God, I knew you liked the feather, don't you? God almighty. One of the carnivores said, people who are taught enough to understand what they are being told, but not enough to question it. Yes, there's a lot of truth in that. It's called the modern education system. Unlike in ancient times and all that, like in Greece and stuff like that, where they wanted to teach you how to think for yourself. And nowadays, they want you how to be a drone. Learn enough to basically work the machinery and do not question the machinery. Yes, very much. We don't want thinkers. That's what they hate. Our elites in Greece always criticize the Greek people for being too, how do they put it? They actually say that Greeks are basically, too much philosophizing sort of thing. No, they actually, and because of their too much philosophizing, they're basically, a chaotic rubble, that they basically are uncontrollable as a population. No, it's actually a good thing that Greeks are like that. It's a problem now with the younger people that they are less like that. It's their parents and grandparents that are more like that rather than the young people. That's a concern for the future, because traditionally Greeks basically were always anti-authoritarian. And that's a good thing, to be non-conformist and basically tell the politicians and bosses to go fuck themselves. I don't see a problem with that, actually. It's a better way for the population to think rather than be servile. Greeks are much more free thinkers in general, especially my generation and older. Younger people are now being far more coaxed. Be a good European, they're told. Be a reasonable European. Be woke. A lot of that is starting to get into the younger people in Greece, unfortunately, which is pissing me off. I don't know why the church isn't basically fighting back against that. They're doing a bit, but not much. They should be basically a bit more vocal. Some of these agendas that are being pushed by the European Commission on Greece to basically, because in Greece basically it's the Ministry of Education and Religion, and what they are trying to do is erode both the culture and the faith within the Greek people, even though 97% of people still consider themselves Greek Orthodox. I hope that continues into the future. But unfortunately, we have a lot of crackpots that have infiltrated the academic world and also the education ministry, and are starting to push some of these enlightened European ideas. They can go and fucking stick their Northern European garbage up their ass, as far as I'm concerned. Not that I have anything against Northern Europeans. Many of them are, but you know what I mean, because you guys live in Northern Europe, in a very authoritarian Northern European societies, highly regulated and told what to do and when to do and what to eat. So I don't want that happening to Greece, personally. And I don't want it happening to Australia, because that's where I live currently. So I'm quite annoyed about these developments, to be told. I basically am I just give the woke people such a hard time. Even some of my friends say, "Oh, Harry," like one of my mates, my brother, Sean, he goes, because when his sister came down, he said, "Please don't, Harry, don't say anything." I said, "Okay, I won't say anything. I'll keep my mouth shut." Because his sister's quite woke. So I ended up talking to her husband and also being, quite moderate with her husband, but throwing in some new ideas and new views, selectively. It's always, small bits, that people can manage. Yips. Ah, yes. Nothing like pseudoscience. Yes. It's also called, see, you've got two major schools that started, especially in the early part of the 20th century. It actually started a bit earlier, but, sort of it sort of when the sort of modernist movements and the postmodernist and all these sort of movements started taking place, where, sort of the movements of rationalists and empiricists. Traditionally, scientists have been empiricists. That means observational, experimental, stuff like that. They don't sit around speculating and making up stories. The people that basically are creating models and speculation and all that sort of stuff are rationalists. They believe that with rationality, with rational thought and models and mathematical models, we can basically explain everything. We are, the masters of the universe. They tried to apply it in economics and made a mess. They tried to apply it in all sorts of areas and have made messes. But they still are there, still pushing their narratives in the climate stuff and all sorts of other things. They manipulate data and manipulate raw data and make up their own narratives, and have their own biases about things. They do not look at raw data like an empiricist would be and say, what does the raw data tell me? Not what do I think the raw data tells me. That's what a crackpot does, and that's what a rationalist does, because they think that they're smarter than actual reality itself. How crazy is that? But that's where they've led us, and they've convinced the rest of the population that they are the experts and they can tell you exactly how the world works and operates. They have turned it into a religion. This scientism is pseudoscience. And this scientism is basically crackpottery of the highest order for them to push their narratives. This technocratic bullshit society that they want to create to control us better. And unfortunately, they've achieved a lot of progress in that area. Yes, unfortunately. But the fight is not over yet. Plenty of good people to keep up the fight and try to enlighten or make some of the general population question the narrative. That's the first course, first question. When people start questioning the narrative, it's harder to manipulate them. Because if these people are telling them the same bullshit, when you've actually exposed some of their bullshit, the people are going to start questioning the other bullshit. It's going to be much harder to manipulate them, because they're going to say, well, these are the same experts. They said this and they're wrong. How can they be? Maybe they're wrong on this stuff. They're going to be more questioning, and then they're going to be more receptive to our ideas. Got it? That's how it works, guys. You got to know how to play the political game. Something that I learned from a young age in student politics. Yes, I even used to use friends to spy on other opponents to find out what they were going to come up with. So I was prepared to fuck them up there. Yeah, you know what I mean. Yes, got to be cunning, my dears, cunning. In the political war, to survive our species, we need to know what they're up to, and we need to fight them tooth and nail. Lots of idiots in the Netherlands. We can't wake them up. Yeah, no, I disagree. Small little bits create dissent. Over time, you can magnify it. It magnifies, believe me. Just received a result from 2020 answer. It appears I'm 100% British Isles and would be my best diet based on these results. Great content, BTW. Well, you've probably got lower conversions of beta carotene, so make sure you're getting your vitamin A from retinol, from animal products. And now, some in the British Isles do have also issues with choline, but it varies. So even though you may be the same, there are variations between different parts. More of the coastal areas tend to have more of this, and so it varies in that regard. So I would say check those sort of things. I will be doing more videos. I mean, I've done methylation ones. I need to do one on choline as well. That was the, because I did the one pathway, but I haven't done the other one. So expect that at some stage for me to do, and we'll cover the genetics on that so you can check those as well. Anyway, let's move on. Dom's got a point there. Meat, no matter where you are from, meat. Ah, yes, meat. I think the carnivore plants makes the vegan brain to explode. Yes, interesting point. I can't believe I'm at the bottom. I'm actually been making good progress. We're down to 2 hours, so we've got an hour to go. So, anything else, my dears? Not even enough to wait. Where is Blinky's gone, hasn't he? Anyway, thought he was going to send me a bit more material to basically laugh. G'day, the man. Do animals like pigs have any mechanisms better than humans with regards to their diet to remove deuterium from their body's fat storage? No idea. Absolutely no idea. I suspect they're probably better deuterium depleters than us. And I'll tell you why. This is sort of, I've got no proof, but they do stay outdoors quite a bit. They do expose all their skin to UV, unlike us. So they're actually basically deuterium depleting far more than us because they're outdoors continuously. Plus, the meat, the fat of pigs has the lowest deuterium levels, even lower than that of cattle or sheep or goats or whatever. So they must be deuterium depleting much better than all the other animals that we eat because they've got much lower deuterium levels in their fat stores. So I suspect they are doing a better job at deuterium depletion. Better than humans, no idea. I suspect more than likely because they do eat a lot of shit and still even though they eat a lot of shit like humans tend to have higher deuterium levels than pigs. So even when you feed them crap, they still have lower deuterium levels in their flesh. So they must be better depleters. Whether that is because of their skin exposure to UV radiation all day, more hours, or whether it's because some internal biological mechanism or capacity to do it better than us, I don't know. But what I'm doing is I'm thinking out aloud that if this, for them to have lower deuterium in their fat, they must deplete better, and all these sort of things compared to other animals and all that. But again, there's those little things. Unfortunately, we don't have the research, so I'm sort of analysing it with the best, what sounds logical, the most likely, probable thing. You're welcome, Bert. Oops. Sucks that there is no good empirical science available. Hopefully our community can grow so that science can be done in our favour. Yes, one can only hope, mate. One can only hope that we can get more traction. I mean, there is that research that is still being promoted by Sean and MetaRex. So people who have not donated should donate to help that along. Turns out the original inhabitants of Ireland were hunter-gatherers. Yes, they were. Black-skinned and blue-eyed and tall. Yes, they were. It was only in recent times that they went from being darker skinned to lighter skinned. It was in the agricultural period. That happened throughout the whole Europe when people turned to agriculture, when the first agriculturalist tribes groups came out of Asia Minor and spread throughout Europe. They intermixed, and as a consequence, things changed within that period. So there is another story that they weren't as black as we think. They were more brown-skinned, a bit like the Samburu people, and it's probably because there were lighter complexions between the Neanderthals. There was a bit of mixing, and maybe there was a bit of whitening, or where you become more tanny or dark or less darker skinned. And so when agriculture came, there was vitamin D deficiencies because of more the kibble type foods that were those people were eating because of agriculturalists, that the requirements of vitamin D access from the sun went up because it was less from the food. And so this changed. Their melanin, and it seems the same thing happened to all these populations which went into these northern latitudes. That means the Chinese, the Northeast Asians, as they're called, their skin went lighter. Mongols are lighter skinned. All these sort of groups, the Sami and all that, for the same sort of reasons. It's believed in that regard because of the different climatic zones that they were in, plus the change to the eating, which lowered the fat-soluble vitamins, and so forced this change, this shift. So, both the climate and the reduction of fat-soluble vitamins is believed to have done it, is the story. But yes, and that's why, as I said, Europeans were much darker skinned, and then they became lighter. So it's surface. It's irrelevant. It's surface. So in a couple of thousand years, it can shift the other way. It's neither here or there. It's irrelevant. What separates us is culture and language, which develops diversely in different areas. But that's also enriches us as well. So there's nothing wrong with that. Anyway, we move on. That was that one. I've already hit that one earlier, didn't I? Yes. That is very true what Don is saying. Okay. Descendants of Atlantis, just like the basket. Unlikely. You guys have been listening to too many crackpots, that's all I can say. But I will tell you where I believe the Atlanteans come from. Looking at some of the old stories of Plato and many of the other ancient Greeks, the way they describe some of this group of people, where Morocco is on the west coast, that used to be basically most of that area and most of the western and middle part of the actual Sahara Desert used to be underwater. and that was like an island, and there was a river system that went all the way to Egypt through that part. So that's quite clear. So what Plato describes is perfect in terms of geological changes. If you go to that area, it actually even has a rounded sort of thing, and some of the stuff found around it, like the tusks and stuff like that, a lot of the things that are described in the stories, some of the animals and other things are found in that area. Coincidence? I beg to differ in that regard. Now, obviously, these people were displaced. You know, they weren't an alien civilization, they weren't advanced or anything like that. They were just basically, if you look at the ruins, it's just basically stone-based. You know, they achieved a certain level of civilization, then it collapsed, and then they moved to other parts of the world. And they may have influenced, and that's always happened. Even after the Bronze Age collapse, there were a lot of movements of people around the place, and they did influence the development of civilization in other parts of the world. It's nothing new. So, but obviously, they were highly cultured, very advanced for their time, and sophisticated as a people. So they'd been in that area, isolated for a very long time, and not exposed to a lot of opposition. So they had more time to develop the arts and crafts and intellectual pursuits. So that's probably why they were more advanced in those regards. So, and where other populations that were warring continuously probably didn't have enough time to basically develop sufficiently their civilization, because you do need a period of peace and stability to achieve things. You only have to look at Europe and North America after the Second World War. The stability has actually brought about a lot of growth in middle class development and a whole lot of other things. And when you see the same stability around the world, you do notice the arts and crafts and all these things developing as well, like in China, in periods of great stability for long periods of time, artistic and every intellectual pursuits and all that develop, flourish, because you're in a stable environment, and you can actually afford to have people doing intellectual pursuits. So there are good reasons for these sort of things. Anyway, but where they actually ended up, some people say that they actually ended up drifting eastward. They were basically sort of pushed away from other groups they couldn't settle in certain areas, and then pushed into Asia Minor, and the early tribal populations were influenced by them in Asia Minor. Whether that's true, who knows? There are some archaeological ruins there that indicate that there are some elements that may be truth in that story, but and that's one way quite close to the Greek world, and maybe that's how the Greeks learned about it. So there is potential. It's very hard when there is a lot of evidence has been lost due to historical changes, but interesting. Anyway, yes, I do have interest in archaeology, as you guys know. So when we say first inhabitants, we are talking about pre, post, Proto-Indo-European migrations. Now, this is before the Indo-Europeans. Anyway, have you heard of Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson in the area of extending back the timeline of human civilization? You might enjoy them. I've heard about them. Some of their arguments are interesting, but I think there is a lot of speculation there as well. I'm not convinced of everything they say. Let's put it that way. They put some credible arguments. There's also a Greek academic in Greece who is talking about something similar. There were earlier civilizations in the Aegean. They were lost because of the changes and it actually shows quite clearly that areas around Athens were basically were basically above sea level, and then end up below sea level, and there may be old lost civilization under that area to the south of Athens in the Corinthian sort of area between Corinth and Athens. But there's potential that there were. We know that off India, there's old lost civilizations that have been found under the sea. And it wouldn't surprise me that there were earlier civilizations that collapsed But yeah, how much they influenced other parts of the world, hard to say. Whether their populations survived or some of them and actually were able to hold on to some elements. I mean, possible. I mean, we know even when the Alexandrian library was burnt and destroyed, some of the information got out. Some of it moved around the Arab world. Some of it was actually saved and then brought back to Europe and other parts of the world. So potentially, nothing is ever completely lost. So there is a potential, but we don't have enough evidence to string it all together in that regard. My criticisms of these two people is more the sort of outlandish sort of speculations they tend to make from very little evidence. We've got to be very, I mean, some of it may be right, I'm not arguing against some of their views, but we've got to be very careful not to fall into crack pottery. It's very easy. So, yeah. The carbon dated butchered reindeer bones to 33,000 years ago. Yes. Yes, no poo. Yes, no poo. It varies. Milk actually varies. So if the cow actually is calving, milk will have higher deuterium. If the mother is not calving, it'll have lower. It varies quite a bit. It varies on the fat content as well. So the more fat that it has, it'll have lower deuterium. The less fat it has, it'll have higher deuterium. So it varies quite a bit. There is not one number for any one milk. For all milk, there is multiple numbers for different milks. So basically the take-home message is the more fat in the milk and the less sugar, the less deuterium. That's how to go on. But it will be generally, because of the higher protein and fat component, it'll be lower than carbohydrates for the same quantity. But exactly where it will be within around the 130 to 140 mark or whatever is hard to say. It varies quite a bit. Sometimes even below 130, it varies quite a bit. It depends. In cheeses, probably the lowest deuterium cheese would be Brie and Camembert. Actually, sorry, Brie, even lower than Camembert. And the reason for that is got more fat, less protein compared to Camembert, but also very little sugar. Like for 100 grams, which is 3.5 ounces, it's about half a gram, bugger all. So it's, in terms of cheeses, it has the lowest level of deuterium because it's got more fat, less protein compared to other cheeses. Probably the only other cheeses, there'd be some other soft cheeses that would be probably similar to Brie in terms of deuterium. So, yeah. And they would be basically in the 120 odd parts per million. So, yes, I love that Brie. Yes, bring on that Brie. Yeah, recall stating that there was a large urban megalopolis in the Amazon rainforest a couple of years back. Yeah, look, there probably were, but how influential that megalopolis was or whatever is hard to say. There's a lot of evidence that's been lost, unfortunately, and things that have been destroyed. So that's the problem. I know they're trying to fill in the gaps, but who's actually coming up with the better storytelling, or is it just all 30% of it fact, 70% of it storytelling? That's my concern. I'd rather know less than speculate. It's, speculation can be very damaging when it comes to science because it can actually lead you down the wrong pathway. And when you go down the wrong pathway, then you sort of Yeah. So yes, I have looked a bit into it, but that's a long conversation, and I'll do a video at some point. Anyway, we're at the bottom again. We've still got 40 minutes, guys. I'll let you put your thinking caps on. While I try to hydrate my tongue. Exactly. They did. From the Americas. Potatoes, that is. Yes. And then they gave you a famine, didn't they? Yes. That kibble created a famine in Ireland. Forced a lot of the Irish out into the Americas, in particular North America. Yes. And some in the Australasian region as well, but more in North America. Yes. Nothing like those pesky tubers from South America. Actually, if you go to South America, the varieties that are there are quite diverse compared to what's in Europe and other parts. So, and a lot of them some of the varieties have got a lot of antioxidants. So they're not as, I mean, it's still carbs, still glucose, but it's not as deleterious as some of the modern stuff that we've created and hybridized and everything else under the sun. Yeah. First of all, the other thing is you have to remember that we didn't have fire until 1.5 million years ago. There is no other archaeological evidence showing anywhere on the planet fire or created by humans. Humans, the first hominins that created fire was about 1.5 billion years ago. And at the time, the weather was very cold. So basically, at that time, you wouldn't have had any tubers or any fruit, because all the way down to the tropics, it was frost on the ground. So basically, we just used it to keep ourselves warm, and eventually to cook. We learned to cook animal foods, and that's why we've got a 1.5 million year adaptation to cooked meat. And at the time, I suspect to extract from cooked meat more nutrients, we had to lower our pH as well. So fermented, so basically probably played a role as well. There's a lot of arguments on it, whether it was the cooked thing or whether it was just a scavenging before we got to 1.5. Don't know. Yes. But anyway, the majority of reasons, I won't use that argument because we don't have any proof. The primary argument is scavenging, but sometimes that can go slightly below 1.5, and people think that it may have had something to do with cooked meat. Still, yeah, we don't know. But it does help when you are at that low pH to extract more from cooked meat in that regard, because you lose all the enzymes that are in raw meats. So, yeah, there are different arguments out there. I'm just bringing everything to the table. What, could be both. One reinforce the other over time. So, but I'll just throw that out there. I still think it's probably early scavenging that probably played the bigger role. But yeah, anyway. Tubers came much later because they've got such poisonous anti-nutrients that they would kill you. A raw potato would kill you unless you cook it. So without fire, and why would you bother, digging up tubers when you've got big animals? We only started using tubers, and even the fossil records actually indicate that. Because if you actually ask them, find me earlier fossil remains that actually indicate that we're having certain foods, they don't exist. So even the fossilized sort of shit, which has got a bit of fibrous stuff that may be coming from tubers and certain plants, is much later on in the history, not earlier. So why not earlier? Because we're eating more more hyper and super carnivores. But as the mega beast collapsed, then we had to shift and get access. So a bit like today, the Messiah are more healthier because they found by using, high quality saturated fat from milk products, they didn't need to consume tubers. Where the Huns, on the other hand, do consume some, because a lot of their meats are very lean, so they have to get additional energy from somewhere. And tubers, they supplement tubers seasonally for about 3 or 4 months of the year, as Mary told us. So, so they do, and cooking allows them to deactivate a lot of the anti-nutrients. So it's the way it goes. But this is a later thing, not an earlier thing, because basically before fire, we would have been dead. And look at the chimps in the savannah. They behave, they collaborate, their empathetic genes go up, and their rivalry and aggressive genes go down because they're more cooperative. They bundle together in groups because on the savannah, that's it. They stand upright more often to look and observe. They go in the evening and cuddle in caves like our early hominins. Very similar. The environment drives behavior and changes epigenetically, and they create spears to kill off little animals. What does that tell you? Some of that stuff was already there from the beginning. It just we just took it to the next level. Yeah, they're not going out digging up tubers. They're developing hunting tools in the savannah. Get real. Exactly. I hate the way potatoes are associated with Ireland. Only becoming here a few years, 100 years. Blinky as well. He's only been here for a couple of years. Mentally deranged, that is. 40 minutes means 2 hours. Hey, don't knock it until you try it, Blinky. Blinky poo. Where have you been hiding, Blinky poo? Pre-barbecue and Blinky. Oh, God. Veronica, how are you? Oops. And zombie, what's zombie saying? Europeans took a long time to even eat them. They were used as animals until certain famines forced them to be. Yep. Actually, tomatoes, if you take a look like other nightshades like tomatoes in southern Europe, the Italians never consumed them for about 30 odd years, I think it was. And then eventually they worked out if they took the skin off and took all the seeds out, they made them less dangerous, and cooked them, they were less dangerous. Yes, got rid of most of the lectins. So people listened to their bodies back then. Today, we modern, educated, technologically advanced humans don't listen to our bodies. We listen to crackpots. We're in pain from lectins and stuff like that. We go, no, there's no problem. Not a problem. The crackpot told me there's no problem. Yes. What degeneration has behold the average person? Fuck me. Blinky, you're so woke. Rainbow, mate. Rainbow. You're a rainbow kid. Explains everything. Caught up to the 1.5 years later. Blink would have to come up with some sly remark and all that. That's why I had to basically give him a bit of a, back slap. I hope you other guys loved it. I did. Do you know what kind of macro food Honest eats to stay lean? Meat. I think Honest prefers to lean out far more. I don't think she basically cares about reproduction that much. But I'll leave that for her to basically explain. It's not for me to say and all that. And there are variations between people. So, but I don't think it's just basically she. I think she did it for a period of time, and it does work, and all that. I actually am going to do a video on how, when it comes to weight loss and stuff like that. Sort of I don't follow it necessarily myself, because I never comply with anything. I'm sort of too much of a rebel. I'll drink alcohol, I'll eat ice cream, I'll do all sorts of things which I know I shouldn't be doing. So I don't follow my own rules. But for people that do want to follow really good, credible rules and how to basically long-term eat the same way and go down to that weight and stay at that weight forever by eating the same way. There is a way. It's called targeted nutrition, and I will explain how it works at some future date. I'll do a video to explain it properly. I have done it myself once to basically get there and plateau out at a specific weight. So it's doable. But then I cheated too many times, especially with ice cream and alcohol. So, yes. Move further down. Blinky's tired from the skies. Probably is. Hey, I was on the stream as well last night. So I ended up getting late to bed. So he's got basically no excuse. And remember, I'm on the eastern seaboard. He's in the Western Australia. So it was actually, when the stream finished here, it was after 1 o'clock. There, it's 2 hours earlier. It was still basically 11 o'clock something. So he's got no excuse. Don't basically give him that much. He gets too much leeway. She has a bit of fat, but not a lot. She basically tends to have smaller amounts, but she doesn't do it consistently. She does have days where she has more. She varies it. She's quite lean. Yes. Basically, she's exhausted a lot of her fat stores in that regard. So I don't think she'll be able to sustain that forever. It won't be a healthy thing to do. Exactly. If you're fat, you can really do that and lean out. But I will basically show you a different way where you eat exactly what you want to eat all life. That means including the fat content and all that, but in a targeted way to achieve long-term, stable, both weight loss and then to plateau out at a specific weight, that target weight. So it's called targeted nutrition for long-term, stable living. Ah, yes. What do you make of male pattern baldness? Any evolutionary solutions? There is no evolutionary reason for it. If you take a look at tribal societies, none of them have these problems. They're eating sulfur-rich foods. I mean, the keratin, within your hair follicles and stuff like that, needs sulfur. So when you're eating a species-appropriate diet, what are you getting? A lot of sulfur amino acids, taurine, methionine, these sort of things. So animal foods are very high in sulfur amino acids. Plants are not. So one, we use it for detoxification, but also as important components for collagen. sulfur is required. It's a very important component of collagen. So if you don't have enough, you're going to have collagen problems. And that's why an animal-based diet is richer in sulfur, amino acids, and the ones that the body requires. We're not talking about the plant ones, we're talking about the animal ones. And that's important. So you eat a species-appropriate diet, you don't have any of these problems. But if you're basically like Pottinger's cat, if you're basically not eating appropriate for a number of generations, you will get baldness and all these sort of things. When you're eating kibble over a number of generations, you will express more of these problems in the, thyroid problems, baldness problems and all that. And it can take 3 generations to reverse cleaning up the diet. You try to tell your kids, grandkids and great-grandkids to basically comply to change the genetics back. Not going to happen in this modern world. So, unless you change the whole food environment for everyone to basically be more species appropriate and ancestral, only then can you reverse all these things in mass within the society. So we're not going to see these changes, unfortunately. Now, if you basically have, like I have, genes for male pattern baldness and stuff like that, if you basically have not gone bald when you were young, I mean, Dad's lost a lot of his hair, but he's basically, now that I've got him on taurine and stuff like that, he's starting to get a bit more and more sulfurs like MSM and stuff like that. He's starting to get a bit more structure back to his hair's coming back. It's taking some time because he's older. He's at 87, takes longer. So, yeah, he should have been doing that years ago. But anyway, that's another story. I've basically been doing it now for a decade, and I used to have some male pattern baldness and it went away. So now it's all sorted, as you can see. My hair follicles are pretty good, thick and all that. So a lot of that went away. A lot of my other relatives, my first cousin from Dad's brother who lives in Melbourne, he's quite bald. So both of them, both John and Harry, have lost quite a lot of pattern baldness as well, but they eat kibble, so that's the reality of that. I stopped eating kibble and reversed a lot of these sort of things. 1, made my skin more youthful. 2, reversed a lot of my hair loss and made my hair thicker. So there are ways, but it varies because of genetics and how much damage has been done over a couple of generations. That's why basically anybody selling out their snake oil juice, it's not going to really work. All you can do is basically reduce it slightly, and that's basically, you need to get the sulfur amino acids in there. You need to get the sufficient protein to support these collagen structures, fat-soluble vitamins, all that sort of stuff is important. And then your genetics and where you're at intergenerationally, how much damage has happened between your grandfather, your father, and yourself. So, yeah, sorry, no easy solution here, but yes. So luckily, in my case, my past relatives hadn't done too much damage. So I was able to reverse a lot of it by cleaning up my diet and pushing up all these fat-soluble vitamins and stuff like that. So, and I'm glad I did. Yes, so I was losing a lot of hair above, and that was annoying, to say the least. So, yes, and didn't need carbs, got rid of the carbs. The carbs were doing the damage. So the crackpots in the repeat community are crackpots. Yeah, you have to take a look at that. Robbie, that's Danny, that's got that guy, Georgy Blinkov, the Russian guy that's losing his hair and all that promotes this sort of stuff. It's not working for him, is it? As I call him, Georgy Blinkov, off. Exactly, he's playing with his tool. So he should be on a carnivore diet if he wants to basically have better hair. Get more sulfur amino acids in there and more high quality protein. but unlikely because he is brainwashed, like the rest of the Ray Peat fan club, into reductionist nonsense. They've gone down one rabbit hole, they lost the rabbit, and now they're confused. Anyway, Blinky, you should make one with Ray Peat chasing after a rabbit. Yes, slap blinkers for me, Harry. You are closer. I can't reach. You got teleport. You got a teleporter genius. You guys are such comedians. I have intense pressure headaches and neck aches from Lyme disease. Any ideas on how to reduce the pain? Lyme disease, it tends to be a bit of an autoimmune. Vitamin D plays a big role. A lot of the fat-soluble vitamins play a big role. Dealing with some of the pathogens in your system plays a big role. Remember, 90% of the signaling from your vagus nerve to your brain comes from your gut. So if that's not you've got issues down there. Usually people that have got Lyme disease and stuff like that do have issues down there. You've got to fix the gut barrier, and you've got to fix some of the deal with the Lyme disease issues, the pathogens. You need to basically get that Dietary stuff to fight some of these pathogens off, and do the B vitamin stuff and the vitamin D. Get on higher doses of vitamin D, and you need to balance that with retinol and MK4, remember. So you need, as I said, when it comes to autoimmune diseases or these type of diseases, vitamin D plays a big, big role. And that takes time. So you will suffer for a while until you can resolve these issues, because a lot of these nerves are being sensitized. So you need to sort that out. But at some stage I will do something specifically hook rider on Lyme's disease, go into a bit of details. I've got some ideas additional to what I said, but I just haven't done enough research on it. But I'll look into it at some point. The funny thing is, when I go down multiple rabbit holes, rabbit holes, I tend to find other things that other people have missed. You know, little esoteric stuff where I see a connection between that mechanism and it makes sense and connects some other mechanism. Then you go, oh, voila, you know, we combine this and this. So yes, in that regard. Because a lot of people talk about, oh, take probiotics to fix your gut, take this, and they miss the vitamin D element, you know. So there's always some interaction and combination when it comes to that sort of stuff. Anyway, thinking outside the box, could there be a senescence involved in balding and them cascading senescence into the neighbouring follicles? Could there also be head shape play a role? I don't think it's strictly senescence, because basically if you had that level of senescence in that area, you would have that sort of equal level, because usually senescence is sort of uniformly at similar levels all over the body. So if it was at that level, you would be really sick. Let's put it that way. And we see plenty of bald people that aren't. So I have a different idea, and that has to do with scalpel calcification. You heard it. Scalpel calcification. And another element that would help with that, and I suspect it helped me as well, is MK4. Getting calcium out of soft tissue. There is a lot of data associated with people with baldness having more calcification in their skull, their basically scalp area. So, and that may be affecting, making things worse. And obviously, if you're on a kibble diet, you tend to basically calcify more. If you're on a seed oil diet, you also calcify more. So I suspect there is something there. Problem is we don't have enough science in terms of showing good mechanism, but I think that basically all these diseases of civilization affect people slightly different in different ways, and they're all related to the same garbage that we're putting into our body, and it's affecting us in different ways in different people depending on the genetics or the susceptibilities and stuff like that. And I think that there is a relationship with bad diets and a number of health issues like more, greater balding and stuff like that, especially for people who are not completely bald, who are not basically where the genetics are basically hardwired over a number of generations, like Bart's is, See, that's hardwired. It can only be reversed over a number of generations cleaning up the diet, where this one is more recent, where you've still got hair when you're young, but then you lose it later on because you're more susceptible. So I suspect from what I've seen, there is more people that do have baldness in later life, like male pattern baldness and all that, tend to have more calcification later on. And what do the repeat crackpots actually recommend? Some of them actually even recommend, taking more calcium. They don't talk about MK4, do they? They don't know what they're talking about. Anyway, so yeah. But that's me looking at some of this literature and seeing associations when it comes to that. Oh, a man after my own heart. Studies show that eating ice cream gives you thicker hair. Only Blinky could come up with a study like that. Do you want me to finance you, Blinky, on that study? Let's go halves. Dermatologically seems to help the baldness and also scars, but looks painful. Yes. Don't know about that sort of stuff. Needling hairs. How could micro-lesions work? Might promote. If I look, I don't know. Look, I've heard about the technique, but I don't know. It may basically stimulate the hair follicles. Is I think the logic for it. It's a bit like when you scrape the epidermis, the dermis, or the skin or whatever. That's exfoliate the skin that sort of has a. It's like it inflames the skin and it actually forces the body to, and it's something similar along those lines. But is the research solid on that point? I don't think so. Will you get some hair follicles coming back? Maybe. I think I've heard that some say that some do come back, but how good it is, it varies. Some people have more success than others. So is it a real solution or permanent solution? Don't know. If it was, it'd be front page news, wouldn't it? So I sort of doubt it. I suspect it has a sort of a marginal effect, stimulating the hair follicles, but also stimulating the skin around the hair follicles and getting better blood circulation is probably going to help a bit. But at the same time, if there's too much calcification in the area, it's still going to limit the blood vessel's ability to get to those areas to provide nutrients. You've got to get nutrients to that area. And that's why I think calcification or scalpel calcification is an issue in this. But is it the only thing? I don't know. It's one of those difficult things. I mean, if I knew, I'd be making millions now, because I'd have a perfect solution, because there's a lot of people out there that would love to grow hair back. So, yes. But I looked into some of this sort of stuff because of the same reasons that I was suffering in the past. but they didn't really work for me until I went on a species-appropriate diet and actually put more sulfur in. The sulfur seemed to basically make my hair thicker and stronger. So throw a bit of taurine and MSM sulfur, and that will help. And remember, taurine also has an anti-inflammatory effect. Plus, combine a high dose of MK4, which I used at the same time to decalcify my heart. And it seemed to work together. So it decalcified on the one hand the heart, but it seemed to also decalcify my scalp. So, coincidence? Maybe, maybe not. So I'll let you guys to ponder that and experiment on yourselves and see whether you get the same results. So if you do, let us know, because it will be interesting. We may have a more than just one N of one, which is myself. So sulfur and MK4, and see how you go. And if you basically get good results, bloody let me know, because that may be a solution for a lot of people. May not be the ultimate solution, but it may be the solution for a lot of people. Plus a species-appropriate diet could be a trifecta. Species-appropriate diet, MK4 and sulfur, MSM and taurine, sulfurs, and there's your trifecta. Could be the thing. We could be on a winner. Oh, I never had a lot of hair. Had a lot of crown in my hair. So bald by choice on a young age. And after years of vegetarian diet, went bald. No growing back a little bit. Years. Try sulfur, try MK4, and see how you go. Now it's growing back, I meant, yes. It's probably because of the sulfur amino acids in the meat. Add more, and you'll get even better results. If I'm right. I could be wrong on that one. Nothing gives you thicker hair than cockroach milk. Nice one, Sam. Seen some guys putting onion juice on their head. Guess it's for the sulfur, like Harry said. Oh, do they? Okay. I don't know how much sulfur you get that way. I think it's better to actually eat it. But anyway, I wouldn't eat onion. I'd eat something else, which would be far better. A steak. Much better sulfur in a steak. Been getting lots of sun. I do need to supplement as well. Any reason for calcification would occur mainly in the scalp. Soft tissue calcification, it's called. And it's usually a deficiency in vitamin K2 that causes it. So all soft tissue calcification. Look, the body needs to basically put calcium somewhere. If it can't put it in the bones effectively, it stores it in around organs or in organs, or in particular, it actually pushes more of it in actual soft tissue like the skin. Why? Because it's safer to put it there. And this sort of, we actually see even calcifications in parts of the skin and bone and spurs and all sorts of things. This is what's happening. It's actually being put in the wrong places. And that happens because lack of fat-soluble vitamins to regulate the calcium. And that's why this sort of happens. So some people get more in the scalp than others, and it has an effect on, I believe, on their male pattern baldness. So that's why all these other things where people, the crackpots in the repeat community, say, oh, take this and take that and all that, and they still can't resolve the problems because it's the inappropriate shit that we've been putting in our body that is calcifying in different parts. Some people get calcifications in some parts of the body, others get bone spurs, others get calcification on the scalp and lose more of their hair because they can't get nutrients to the follicles because of the calcification, all these different things. So that's my theory. I could be completely wrong about it. It's a hypothesis of mine, but I could be completely, utterly wrong. But it's basically from all the literature that I've looked at. Give it a try. And if it works for you, let me know. We'll have more than an N of 1 being myself. We'll have more N's of 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and maybe we can make an argument for a sulfur supplementation, MK4, and a carny diet as a trifecta to basically deal with. And we could probably recommend it to the Ray Pete fan club. Maybe we could convert them by proving that our way is the right way, even on that point. So, getting rid of calcification of fibrosis, one should mobilize stem cells. Nothing to do with stem cells, mate. We need to. You can have all the cerule you like, or other stem cell enhancing stuff and all that. If you've got calcification up there that's not getting rid of it, not going to happen. Get your MK4, get your fat soluble vitamins that regulate all that sort of stuff much better. Rub a steak on your head 3 times a day. That's why I love you, Bert. You've got a great sense of humour. You'll get additional methionine. Do saunas, help with calcifications. No idea. Citrulline may be of use as a vasodilator, but not a decalcifier. It sort of helps in an indirect way. So I still use citrulline as well, but that's because of the vasodilation, get the nitric oxide synthesis up and all that, and also better blood circulation. So yeah, it could have an influence, but it would be more of an indirect rather than a direct. Getting the calcification out of the scalp is the direct. That's where high doses of MK4, and sulfur amino acids are going to play a role. Anyway, I'm wearing a bacon hat to protect me from 5G. Disturbing. I told you Gregor was actually had a few issues. So TT, when you are hungry, you eat the hat. Ingenious. Yes, when it's summer, it will be nice to get a little bit of fried. Actually, I had about 354 grams of bacon today. I grabbed a whole bacon thing and I said, oh, fuck it, I'm going to cook it all and I'm going to have bacon. So that's what I had. I just had a big bacon steak and loved it. Oops. And even better, let the treadmill rub it in your head. Probably only one way to get rid of the calcium too. Hey, I'm doing the comedy here. Look, mate, guys, I appreciate it. It's nice to just wind down and be lighthearted at the end. So we're basically at 3 hours. So I'm going to pull the pin in about 5 minutes. I do appreciate everybody's contribution today. Thanks, Blinky, for a couple of the stuff that you pushed through as well. Do appreciate it. And, share the information in that regard. At some point, I'm going to look at doing something on male pattern baldness and all that. I've been thinking about doing it and all that sort of stuff, but not that I'm not confident on my hypothesis, but I don't want to actually also give false hope to people either. So that's why I'm saying it seemed to work for me. Give it a try, you know. I can't believe you got to the end of the chat. Shock horror. He's always pushing. Looks like a dildo. T1 would love that. G'day, Jared. Did you just get up out of bed? Yeah, we're still at it. I'm about to pull the plug in about 4 odd minutes from now. The cancer info was more important than baldness. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Even Lukey's up. Hello, everyone. Hit thumbs up. Yes, hit the like button, please. Good for reminding me, Lukey. Hope you slept well. Oops. That one. Yeah, so the he actually went quite late to bed. It was after 1, I think. Wasn't it? I think so. So didn't have enough sleep, probably not. You don't know, zombie. He may have had a wet dream and got him up and woke him up. One doesn't know exactly what may have caused it. We shift this one over here, and let me look that up. It's that one there, isn't it? Peak. This is the one. I'll just put it in the. That's the one there. So that's the link for the one. It's that one there. Oh, move. I thought I could adjust it more. No. Ah. No, can't adjust it. Thought I could. Fuck it. So it's that one there that's on screen. That one's the per capsule 15 in that regard. It's pretty clean. Other ingredients: organic rice hull and hypomellose capsule with purified water. So it's got nothing else in it. So it's pretty clean in that regard. Same stuff that the bacteria convert from key 1. So that's the one there to use, and that's the high dose that I was using for my decalcification. So back to this chap. Oh, what just fucking happened there? I just lost the other part of the stream for some bloody reason. So, yeah, I lost that portion. For some reason, it actually reset on me. So there's a few things there that I missed. Let me just check. Well, I got 6 hours. Might just relax for half an hour, but waking up later only makes things worse. Then the next one, Ramika, I wish I could have some Paranka for breakfast. Then Sam, good luck finding anyone not pushing MK7 in their K2 supplements. Yeah, most people, a third of the population can't even fucking convert MK7. And Luke is one of the last survivors in Brazil. They dropped dead like flies from COVID, they tell us. Yes, Sam, bodybuilders are taking MK7 for their bad hearts. Sad, yes, especially when a third of them probably can't even fucking convert it. Yes, it is quite sad in that regard. Now I realise that if I actually do that enlargement thing, it actually wipes out everything in my chat thing. That's annoying. Yes, Brazilian mutation, aka Sambo virus. Yes. And King of Brazil, yes, Lucas. Yes. That would suggest a vegetarians take it if they have deteriorated discs in their back. Yep. That's exactly right. Yep. If basically vegetarians combined dairy products together with MK4, yep, they could help themselves. That's true. So if you've got friends that are, my vegan friend is deteriorating back, I may be able to convince her to take vegetarian subs, but not meat. Yeah, but still needs to get, basically, if she's got poor retinol conversion, that's going to be a problem. She still needs other fat-soluble vitamins like vitamin D and retinol in her diet. So if she's a poor beta-carotene converter, she's going to have to get retinol from somewhere. You need all three. You just have to basically look and zombie and actually see what combinations of vegan-friendly types, so you can actually provide her all three in a supplemental form, because she won't probably. Yeah, I know. It's no other option. Yep, I think I covered that just a moment ago, which is basically you need all the fat-soluble vitamins. So anyway, best chat ever. You're welcome. I think she's has terrible retinol conversion. She's Danish, more than likely. More than likely. So she'll need retinol as well, because they work synergistically. If you want good bone health, you need the fat-soluble vitamins. There's no way around it. What on earth can one sort the Lactobacillus reuteri and other Lactobacillus reuteri strains? This is frustrating. The boldness out of me. As I said, Sam, I said you got to buy the Swedish strain. That is the only one. I'm going to do a video on these damn things just to explain things, but I'll actually just explain it quickly. All the lactobacillus, all the different, there are families. So when you hear Lactobacillus reuteri, Lactobacillus rhamnosus, Lactobacillus casei, Lactobacillus acidophilus, All these are families. They're not a specific strain. Within the family, so just think it's like talking about a race, like Greeks, Italians, French, Germans, okay? And then there are people in that family, Harrys and Johns and whatever else. They are the strains. So the strains have got numbers against them, like the one that actually comes from Sweden, DSM 17, was it 96, 76 or whatever, which is one of the strains. That is a specific strain. Within that family, you can have good strains and bad strains. So when somebody says, take Lactobacillus reuteri, they don't know what the fuck they're talking about, because there are some in all these different families, there are some that are neutral, beneficial, and even pathogenic. So you have to have the specific strain. That is why I don't recommend. I always recommend a gut restoration using B vitamins and vitamin D, and then using specific strains, and only those strains that have been shown to basically do specific stuff in the gut, fight pathogens, clear out stuff, sort out this or whatever. That is targeted probiotics. That's what I recommend. So I hope that's no longer confusing. If you look at all my videos, I actually tell you exactly what to go and buy and where to buy it from. Now, if you don't like some of the stuff that's in it, bad luck, that's your problem. Deal with it. If you want the benefits, you've got to take it. It's not as if you're going to take it forever. And the little other stuff that's in there, your body's got more than enough capacity to detoxify if you're on a species appropriate diet. So stop being childish about it and worrying about minor little things, of a couple of fillers here or there. If you want the benefit, take the damn thing. Bake a steak and say that it's a new super realistic Beyond Meat steak. Line them up, boys. I guess, tongue twister. I guess look for dairy products with the most vitamin A. Yep, good suggestion as well. I'd basically give her a bit of liver without telling her. Butter seems to be a high in vitamin A. That's true. Perhaps get unpasteurized versions. Good idea. Very good thinking, Bert. Very good thinking. Egg yolks as well. Yes. Yes. People have got their thinking caps. Might be able to get her to eat eggs again. She feeds her kids eggs and dairy. So, yeah, hopefully you can get her to basically start eating some of this stuff. At least she's doing that for her kids. Thank the fuck for that. Unlike those vegans that kill their kids on kibble. Okay, we've had enough fun, and I've extended it way beyond. It's nearly, look, we'll run it down to 9:30, another 10 minutes. I'll give you another 10 minutes, and then I'll pull the plug. So, yeah. But generally speaking, when it comes to bacterial strains is what we're looking at that do specific things, and only those. So you cannot go and buy some other strain that is irrelevant to the requirement. Now you're being comical. That's good to see. You've got a sense of humour at least. Yes. You look much better now, Harry. Thanks for the stream. You're welcome. I'm actually at the moment researching a couple of other strains for a number of other things. a number of other bacteria that have benefits for different things. We're talking about for sleep, for things like insomnia. We're talking about for a number of different ailments. And I'm trying to get the best combination for a number of these things. So, because the problem is, look, traditionally humans would have had like 4,000 to 5,000 bacterial strains in their body. And then in the modern world, we've got about 1,000. And many people taking antibiotics and inappropriate diets and lifestyles can actually decimate large parts of that. They can reduce it by 75%. So they can be down to 200 or whatever. So, yeah, quite bad. And then they wonder why they've got a whole lot of pathogens in there and none of the other stuff, or very little of the other stuff, sort of hiding away in little nooks and crannies trying to survive. And it's only when you give them the B vitamins and the vitamin D, they start coming back. But in order to populate back, you need to suppress the pathogens with those other ones, like the Dietary, that suppresses C. diff and a number of the other things. And when you suppress them, all the other stuff, then the beneficial ones can come back over the 3 months. And that's the strategy, to basically restore your gut microbiome to where it was when you were more youthful or younger and less damaged. So that's the whole purpose. But also we want to add a few new stuff, new critters in there that can enhance your body's ability to, so you can live longer, so you can live healthier, so you can fight off a whole lot of things as you're getting older. So what's Blinky saying? Longest 5 minutes ever. Yeah, I know. I'm extending it, Blinky. I'm extending it. Another 7 minutes. See, interrupting me. We just lost a few minutes. You know? And yeah, so ultimately I'm trying to find and then be able to customize certain things. There's a couple of strains that we can't get, unfortunately, at this stage. So I've put that research on the back burner. I know about it. I've hidden it. I don't want my competition to know about it, but I've put it away. And when eventually somebody commercializes it and puts it out there, then I'll let you guys know. So the current ones that I will only be talking about are ones that are already available commercially. I tried going through, I even tried actually getting somebody to set up like ordering it like a company type thing, and it didn't really work. So yeah, so there's trying to get certain stuff sometimes is very fucking difficult, even if you're prepared to cough up some money. Had I basically had like an academic qualifications behind my name and sort of said, oh, look, I'm an academic, I need to get this to basically do some research, they probably would have sent it to me, you know. But otherwise, it's very hard to get certain things which are still in that experimental where they haven't actually created a product yet to put it out. Yes. So not easy. And obviously they don't want that strain until they commercialise it, getting out anyway to other people that they don't have contractual connections with. So, yes, that didn't work. And I realised without a contract, they're not going to basically provide it to me. And if they know who I am, then they'll tell me to fuck off anyway. So I knew that wasn't going to work. So I gave up on that whole idea. So now I just keep an eye and see if they do bring products out. So keep an eye on the companies. Periodically, I'll do a bit of a search and just check them. I've got them all like bookmarked. And if at some stage they decide to get it out there, we'll be some of the first to jump on that new stuff. So, yes. Or you could probably go to Africa and get yourself a fecal transplant from one of the tribal people. That's probably another option, especially somebody that's got a really bad gut. Yes, it's an option. There's always options in that regard. But I've, Metaflora and a couple of others that I've talked about, which are very good in that regard. So there's always options in that regard. LifeS, I have heard of them. Since you are still here and no other questions pop in, 4 minutes, Sam, 4 minutes. We're down to 4 minutes. Any last desperate questions? Otherwise, we'll be getting a lot from the peanut gallery called Blinky's corner. I believe we agree that the niacin is best taken in the morning, but the enzymatic conversion delays the boost of NAD+. So couldn't you be messing with your circadian clock? Not really. I usually take it midday. I don't take it in the morning. My niacin. So I tend to take it midday. So what could I say in that regard? I tend to basically stick, as I said, to the lower range, so the 250, I split it in half, which I get at 125. I get about nearly 200 from the food, or sometimes slightly less, and then I take one of those periodically now and then, which basically gives me about a 300 boost. As I said, I don't want to be above 300. I want to be around 300 or below. We shouldn't have too much, especially as we age, because of CD38. What we should do is try encourage natural NAD+, because, and it's the reason why some more recent research has come out showing that NAD boosters, especially in high doses, like they do with like they take 1 or 2 grams for NMN and NR, have actually shown also susceptibility to cancer risks, because CD38 is a protective mechanism. I would rather use senolytics like fisetin, as I said, to knock off the senescent cells and actually naturally suppress CD38, because you've got less senescent cells, and then naturally NAD plus will come up to more useful levels, and then supporting it with niacin is less risky with, in that regard, or with any of this sort of stuff. But I'd still stick to the 300 even, because, I'd just like to support it in general rather than basically try to boost it too high in outside natural levels. So that's why I'm not into really NAD boosters as I was. I'm even less now than what I was in the past. So I think that basically it's best to re-regulate the body rather than trying to artificially force it to do things which it's working against the body, work with the body rather than against. That's why I've shifted more to senolytics nowadays. So that's been my focus, Sam, my different approach. Their products vary. Some of it's pretty good. Some of it's less than. It varies. That would be a long conversation to go through all their products to basically talk and give you my reasonings. But eventually, I will be bringing up some of the strains, and even some of the companies. Like for instance, that Swedish company. One of the strains really works really well for pathogenics. The other strain that they've got in there doesn't really do much. Has some other benefits here or there, but doesn't, supporting certain things, but it doesn't really do much, so it's the other one that really would be greater to have it in a larger quantity, but they don't. So there's always, with supplements, you never get exactly what you want always. But yes, that would be a long conversation, and we're at 1:30, so I'm going to pretty much stop it here. Stan Everin, powerlifter, is now helping John Jones, big USAF fighter, with his vertical diet, more red meat and lower FODMAP plans. Is in some ways the vegan propaganda can't combat what actually works. Exactly, that's exactly right. Low FODMAP plants is probably better some of these people are not going to go completely carnivore, but more animal foods and lower problematic plants is probably the way to go for these people. And so, yeah, Stan, I mean, I know Stan's a good friend of Bart's, and it's a different world, all that. And he would agree that it's probably, you probably don't need these. And the reality is, when we look at the stuff, what is in a lot of these low FODMAP plants, what is there? There's not a lot of nutrition. It's a filler. And it sort of satisfies certain people because they don't want to give up on plants altogether. So that's fine, but it's not. But it's really the meat that really is making the difference. And we know that. It's yeah. So exactly, it is the meat. The meat is the meat of the business. Isn't it, Blinky? Ah, yes. And we're over 2 minutes, Blinky. You didn't say anything to warn me that I'm over 2 minutes. You're supposed to be my eyes and ears and my time clock. Anyway, guys, see yous. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. And I will see all you lovely people next week. And we will chat and gossip about things in the Carney community and a whole lot of other things in that regard. Too bad you're leaving. Yes, I have to. At some point, I have to get to bed. I do have work tomorrow. Just about to ask something about spring of conscious. Next week, Sam. Next week. Thanks, mate. Thanks. And thanks everyone. Appreciate it. Take care and be nice to each other. And I will see all you lovely people next week. See yous.